Chapter 449. After finishing his favorite KFC, Xiao Yunju was satisfied. Rubbing his full tummy, he excitedly pulled Ce with one hand and Yunjian with the other as they walked out of the KFC. Xiao Yunju held Yunjian and Ce's hands respectively as he bounced around, looking extremely excited. Xiao Yunju had been eating well these days and his skinny body was starting to grow. At least, Xiao Yunju's cheeks were now round and his petite frame had grown taller as well, almost reaching Yunjian's chest height now. Xiao Zhu, your Ce, Gidge said he's bringing you to buy new clothes. You can buy as many as you want. It's almost Chinese New Year, our Xiao Zhu has to dress up beautifully. Yunjian squatted down and pinched Xiao Yunju's cheeks lightly. She pressed her lips together, a beautiful smile playing on her beautiful face. As they spoke, Yunjian could not help teasing Ce. Ce, who stood aside, did not utter a word. When did he say that? Yay, new clothes. Xiao Zhu wants to buy new clothes. Xiao Yunju grabbed Yunjian and Ce's hands excitedly and jumped up and down. Ce felt inexplicably refreshed when he saw how happy Xiao Yunju was and how Yunjian was smiling sincerely as well. Looking at the black watch on his wrist, Ce's lips curled into a smirk as he said frivolously, "Let's go." It was only then that the three of them made their way to Longmen City's shopping mall. The clothes that Xiao Yunju was wearing should be bought at the children's store. When Yunjian and Ce walked out of the store with a big bag of Xiao Yunju's clothes, they bumped into Chu Ning at the entrance. Longmen City was only so big and Yunjian had not been to the military training camp recently as the Chinese New Year was approaching. It was not surprising that they bumped into Chu Ning here. Chu Ning was currently holding on to a middle-aged woman who was rather plump and well-proportioned. The moment she saw Yunjian, Chu Ning ran over with the middle-aged woman. "Yunjian, I didn't expect to see you here." Chu Ning had just spoken when she was suddenly captivated by Xiao Yunju's exquisite face. "Little brother, it's you." Chu Ning squatted down and pinched Xiao Yunju's cheeks like Yunjian did before she exclaimed. Chu Ning had met both Ce and Xiao Yunju before. However, her memory of Xiao Yunju was still stuck at the little boy Yunjian had saved when they were hiking on Weiwu Mountain in Jinglian town. She did not pay much attention to him back then, but she heard that Yunjian had adopted him. "Hello, Jijia." Xiao Yunju greeted Chu Ning politely. "Hee, you're so cute." Chu Ning chuckled at Xiao Yunju and stood up. She turned to introduce Yunjian and the rest to the middle-aged woman standing beside her before turning back to introduce the middle-aged woman. "This is my mom." The middle-aged woman was Chu Ning's mother, Wenhui. Wenhui had heard from her daughter, Chu Ning, about Yunjian's performance in the special forces early on. In particular, her daughter, Chu Ning, kept telling her that Team Monarch's great achievements were all thanks to Yunjian. Therefore, when Chu Ning introduced her as Yunjian, Wenhui quickly greeted her. "Hello, young lady." They soon got to know each other. Since Yunjian and Chu Ning were close, they went shopping together for a while. When they parted, Chu Ning's mother, Wenhui, seemed to like Yunjian very much. She even invited Yunjian, "Young lady, come to my house when you're free." Ning Ning said that she's going out with her friends after the New Year. "You're coming together, aren't you?" Yunjian then recalled that Team Monarch had planned to go out again after the New Year after completing the mission of retrieving the jade pendant from Peter. And this time, they were allowed to bring their relatives and friends along for the trip. If Wenhui had not mentioned it, Yunjian would have forgotten about it. Chapter 450. After bidding farewell to Chu Ning and Wenhui, Yunjian held Xiao Yunju's hand while Xiao Yunju held Ce's hand with his other hand as they walked towards the garage. It was already 6 or 7 in the evening and the sky darkened quickly in winter. Yunjian and Ce brought Xiao Yunju to the garage. After starting the car, the two of them brought Xiao Yunju home. The days before the New Year passed quickly and before long, it was the eve of the New Year. Ce had never celebrated the New Year. He was born into a military family and his father, Si Chu, did not care much about him and usually did not care whether he was dead or alive. Therefore, CE had never celebrated the New Year even though he had lived for 19 years. 3 days before the New Year, CE returned to an Hun organization. Before he left, Yun Jian reminded him to remember to rush back on the night of the New Year. They were a family, so it was natural for them to celebrate the New Year together. The word family warmed CE's heart. After he promised Yun Jian, he left with Adam and Mo's senator. There were many things waiting for him in an Hun organization. After all, it was an assassin organization, but unlike the Kosha mercenaries, he could not just sit around and do nothing all day long like Yun Jian. The Kosha mercenaries issued missions on the website and all they had to do was contact the employer and complete the mission. An Hun organization, on the other hand, trained batches of assassins and secret agents. Naturally, this was different. Su Zetian's injuries were recovering at an astonishing speed. He could now return to Falcon Hall to handle some matters that required him to think and not do with his hands with the help of his wife, Lin Wanru. On the night of the Spring Festival, everyone went back to their homes and gathered in one place. Qin Yiru planned to bring Yun Jian, Yun Yi, and Xiao Yunju back to her parents' home in town for the New Year. After all, she was a native of Xinjiang town. Of course, they had to go home on New Year's Eve. At 4:00 in the afternoon, Yun Jian packed her things and prepared to return to the countryside with Qin Yiru. She held Xiao Yunju's hand and waited at home for a long time, but CE did not return. In the end, she left a note in CE's room and followed Qin Yiru on the bus back to Xinjiang town. Grandma Zhang Meihua's attitude towards Qin Yiru and Yun Jian had been much more restrained since the last time they met. Especially when she heard from Qin Fangfang's family that Yun Jian was the director of new crews. When she first heard this, Zhang Meihua was dumbfounded on the spot. She had never imagined that her most insignificant granddaughter would become the director of new crews, a company that had stirred up a storm in the country. Zhang Meihua had been bragging about this for a long time. She had even bragged about it in front of her distant relatives. However, Zhang Meihua did not tell them that Yun Jian was the director of new crews because her fourth child, Qin Fangfang, had told her that Yun Jian did not like people spreading the news. Zhang Meihua loved to suck up to Yun Jian now. She was still waiting for Yun Jian to take care of her when she was old. The news of Yun Jian starting a company had already spread in Xinjiang town. Qin Yiru naturally knew about it too. When she first found out, she had asked Yun Jian about it. Yun Jian had said that she knew Mayor Gu and gave him a good proposal to invest in the company. Qin Yiru believed this lie without a doubt and did not ask further. Actually, if Qin Yiru had asked further, Yun Jian might have spilled the beans. When Qin Yiru brought Yun Jian, Yun Yi, and Xiao Yunju back to Xinjiang town, Zhang Meihua's family had already prepared a banquet. Everyone in the town would treat their distant relatives and neighbors to a meal before the New Year. Seeing that Qin Yiru had brought Yun Jian and the rest home, someone immediately spoke to Yun Jian, but the words were directed at Zhang Meihua. "Meihua, is she your granddaughter Yun Jian? She's starting a company at such a young age?" "Huh. That's amazing." This person spoke eloquently, but judging from his tone, he had no intention of praising Yun Jian. Chapter 451. Isn't that so? My Jian is amazing. Zhang Meihua's face was plastered with a wide grin as she quickly responded to the person. Her tone made it sound like she was close to Yun Jian. Even the way she addressed her had turned into an intimate Jian. Yun Jian did not hear Zhang Meihua's boasting, even if the latter was bragging about herself to others. When Qin Yiru and her were in trouble back then, Zhang Meihua had not been so nice. Back then, Zhang Meihua had acted as if she did not want to acknowledge Qin Yiru as her daughter for the rest of her life. Now that Yun Jian's capabilities were exposed, Zhang Meihua had learned to suck up to her. Yun Jian had never cared about people like her. If Zhang Meihua was not Qin Yiru's biological mother and Qin Yiru was not a person who valued relationships, she would not have treated Zhang Meihua as her biological mother. To Qin Yiru, no matter how her own mother treated her, she would not ignore Zhang Meihua forever. A person's nature was determined. Qin Yiru was a kind person. Yun Jian could only accept it. Qin Yiru was her mother. In Yun Jian's heart, Qin Yiru was someone who was worth protecting for the rest of her life. Zhang Meihua's family had set up 3 tables of food and wine tonight to entertain their distant relatives and neighbors. This was a custom in Xinjiang town as well as Longmen City. A few days before the new year, they would use pig's head and various dishes to worship the gods. After the worship, the sumptuous dishes would be used to entertain their relatives and friends to enjoy together. This was a superstition passed down from the older generation. At the same time, it was also a way to keep in touch with distant relatives and neighbors. After all, some distant relatives could no longer be contacted after the older generation passed away. At this moment, the 3 tables of dishes were almost full. Yiru, come, sit here. At this time, Zhang Meihua waved at Qin Yiru and signaled for Qin Yiru to bring Yun Jian and the others to sit at the table where the man who said that Yun Jian had founded her own company at such a young age was sitting. The other 2 tables were already full, and only that table had a few empty seats left. In order to express her goodwill to Yun Jian, Zhang Meihua even personally brought over the bowls and chopsticks for Yun Jian and the others. Oh, okay, Mom. Qin Yiru rarely saw Zhang Meihua being so protective of her, so she quickly took the child and sat over. Since Qin Yiru had gone over, Yun Jian naturally wouldn't stand alone. She held Xiao Yunju's hand and sat down next to Yun Yi. The table could seat more than a dozen people, so with the addition of Qin Yiru and the others, it was already full. Zhang Meihua squeezed herself in and purposely squeezed herself next to Yun Jian's seat, acting like she was close to her. Jian, he's your uncle. Your uncle is a high-ranking official in Zhe province. Your uncle praised you just now, he said that you're amazing. Zhang Meihua could not help going over to Yun Jian to introduce the person who praised her just now to Yun Jian once she sat down. The person who praised Yun Jian was Yun Jian's uncle, Qin Yiru's cousin, Qin Li. Now that he was in Yun Jian's generation, he was considered a distant relative of Qin Li's. Anyone with a discerning eye could tell what Zhang Meihua had said just now. She was sucking up to Yun Jian but had pointed out a point in a roundabout way. Qin Li was a high-ranking official in Zhe province. It was already a compliment for someone like him to say that Yun Jian was amazing. Chapter 452. In fact, Qin Li did look down on Yun Jian. It could even be said that Qin Li looked down on Zhang Meihua's family. Qin Li's father and Zhang Meihua were siblings, so Zhang Meihua's generation had plenty of siblings as well. When it was Yun Jian's generation, these people were no longer as close as they used to be. They were considered distant relatives now, but it was hard to say if they could maintain their relationship in the future. Qin Li, on the other hand, was always boasting about his status as a high-ranking official. Especially during the reunion dinner during Chinese New Year or when relatives gathered like today, it was a time to show off one's status. It was one thing for everyone to sit down and have dinner together. Of course, it was more important to talk about what one had done this year or how much one's income was. Comparisons were unavoidable. Especially those who had a higher income, they would think that they were superior while those who had a lower income and did not have a high status in society would feel inferior in comparison. Qin Li was the type of person who wanted to show off his status and high income in front of his distant relatives. As for why he looked down on Zhang Meihua's family, it was because in Qin Li's impression of his father's younger sister, Zhang Meihua's generation, there had never been a capable person. Unlike his own line of descent. Which one of them did not have excellent grades, get into a good high school or university, and finally get a decent job? In fact, other than Yun Jian, Zhang Meihua and the rest did not seem to notice Qin Li's disdain for Zhang Meihua's family at all and fawned over Qin Li even more. Yun Jian, on the other hand, ignored Zhang Meihua's words. Zhang Meihua's intention was clear. She wanted her to fawn over Qin Li and suck up to him as well. By doing so, it was like Zhang Meihua was introducing Yun Jian to an important figure like Qin Li. With this, Zhang Meihua thought that Yun Jian would owe her a favor. However, she did not expect Yun Jian to not give her any face. Jian, your uncle is praising you. Aren't you going to say something? Zhang Meihua urged when she saw that Yun Jian did not give her face. As she spoke, Zhang Meihua even winked at Qin Yiru, as if she wanted Qin Yiru to tell Yunjian to be obedient. However, Qin Yiru did not notice Zhang Meihua's frown. Qin Yiru thought that Zhang Meihua's eyes were hurting. She asked Zhang Meihua in confusion and worry, "Mom, what's wrong with you? Are your eyes hurting?" "It's fine." When Zhang Meihua heard what Qin Yiru said, she was so angry that her breathing quickened. She shouted at Qin Yiru angrily. In such a situation, Zhang Meihua couldn't speak carelessly. However, just when Zhang Meihua thought that Yunjian wouldn't say a word, Zhang Meihua suddenly stopped talking. Yunjian's lips curled up slightly as she looked at Qin Li, who was sitting opposite her. Their gazes met, but she was not inferior to him at all. "Thank you for the compliment," Yunjian replied with a press of her lips. If Qin Li's compliment of Yunjian just now was extremely hypocritical, then Yunjian's rebuttal was as distant as it could be. Even Qin Li, who was sitting opposite of Yunjian, could not help taking a few more glances at Yunjian when they heard what she said. In spite of it, she was only slightly capable. It was already impressive enough for someone her age to be able to start a small company. Chapter 453. In short, Qin Li did not take Yunjian seriously at all. Of course, he would not say this in front of everyone present. After a sumptuous dinner, Qin Yiru and Zhang Meihua went to clean up the plates and utensils used for dinner. Since it was Zhang Meihua's family who had invited them, other than Qin Yiru and the other women who were cleaning up the leftover utensils, the rest of them sat on the bench in the yard to brag about their abilities. "Qin Li, you've earned quite a bit this year, haven't you? Huh, you've been promoted twice already. You can catch up to the position of Zhe Province's chief of administration now," someone said to Qin Li with deep envy. Hearing this, Qin Li's pride immediately came out. However, his words were very low-key. "How could that be? I'm still working hard. I don't know how far I can go. This road is getting harder and harder to walk." Yunjian and the other children of the same age stood on the side and chatted with the adults. It was only when this group of adults started to talk about their children that they started to brag about their children's abilities. "Our Huan is in his 3rd year of high school now. He just took part in a national taekwondo competition not too long ago. Fortunately, he didn't embarrass himself. He more or less won the 3rd prize," Qin Li said. When Qin Li said this, he purposely glanced at his son, Qin Huan. There was an indescribable sense of pride in his tone. Winning the 3rd prize in a national taekwondo competition. "Old Qin, it's not that I want to criticize your son, but he's really talented in taekwondo," someone chimed in. After all, in the eyes of the commoners, a child's performance was already impressive if he could win a place in Longmen City or Zhe Province. It was a great honor for Qin Li's son, Qin Huan, to win a prize in a national taekwondo competition. On the other hand, Qin Huan grinned from ear to ear after being praised. Qin Huan was Qin Li's son and he was 18 this year. Because of his good family background, Qin Huan had always walked in front of other children since he was young. He had been practicing taekwondo since he was young. Today, to be able to achieve such results, it was already enough to show off in front of a group of ignorant relatives and friends. Yunjian stood at the side. She merely watched the commotion indifferently and remained silent. That was until Qin Li called his son, Qin Huan, over to show everyone some taekwondo. Qin Huan stood arrogantly in front of everyone and practiced a few moves that he usually practiced. In Qin Huan's opinion, it was already very impressive for him to get the 3rd prize in the national competition at such a young age. After Qin Huan finished this taekwondo move, he received applause from everyone present. He even reached out to stroke his short hair to show off his domineering demeanor. "TSK. Was that all? Why don't you compete with Yunjian? She's amazing." At this moment, Qin Fenger's mocking voice suddenly rang out. Qin Fenger was present and had been since the beginning. She was the daughter of Yunjian's uncle in name, Qin Liqian, and this house belonged to Qin Liqian. Qin Fenger was not studying during the Lunar New Year, so of course she was present. It was just that she did not sit at the same table as Yunjian in the beginning, so she did not match up to her boss. In fact, after being intimidated by Yun Jian's hypnosis last time, Qin Fenger had grown increasingly disgusted with Yun Jian. Seeing how good Qin Huan's taekwondo moves were, Qin Fenger suddenly thought that Yun Jian seemed to know a thing or two too. Chapter 454. Qin Huan was someone who had won the third prize in the National Youth Taekwondo competition. Just based on this, Yun Jian couldn't compare to him. That was why Qin Fenger suddenly thought of letting Yun Jian go up and fight with Qin Huan. Moreover, she purposely praised Yun Jian and made Qin Huan think that Yun Jian also practiced taekwondo. Qin Huan was competitive. Qin Fenger's motive was to let Qin Huan think that Yun Jian had some ability and stimulate his inner competitive spirit to fight with Yun Jian. It would be best if he could cripple Yun Jian. It would be best if he could disfigure her face. Qin Fenger was most jealous of Yun Jian's appearance. As expected, the moment Qin Fenger said that Yun Jian was amazing, Qin Huan immediately sized up Yun Jian. Not only Qin Huan, but everyone present turned to look at Yun Jian. Moreover, all of them had a shocked expression on their faces. Yun Jian knew taekwondo. Previously, when they heard Zhang Meihua say that Yun Jian had started her own company, everyone was already shocked. In the end, from Qin Fenger's words, he could hear even more misunderstandings. Yun Jian knew taekwondo. She looked so thin and weak, but she actually knew taekwondo. You know taekwondo? Qin Huan, who was still in high spirits, was now standing in front of Yun Jian. He looked at Yun Jian and at the same time, used his tall and burly figure to look down on Yun Jian. His expression was as if he didn't care that Yun Jian also knew taekwondo. Yun Jian didn't say a word and was ridiculed for no reason. She crossed her arms and glanced at Qin Fenger. There was a sharp and murderous glint in her eyes. Under everyone's gaze, Yun Jian pursed her red lips slightly. Her half-smile, coupled with her exquisite and beautiful face, made people suffocate for a moment. Qin Fenger, who was standing at the side, dug her nails into her flesh. What she hated the most was Yun Jian's face. That's right, I do know taekwondo. Yun Jian shrugged and turned back to look at Qin Fenger. Just because Qin Fenger could glare at others, did she think that Yun Jian could not glare at others? Then let's have a match. Qin Huan said excitedly. Qin Huan felt that he had just performed a few taekwondo punches in front of everyone, but it still wasn't impressive enough. It had to be like a taekwondo competition. Only by knocking down the opponent would it give people a sense of awe. But Qin Huan had no opponent, so he could only fight. Coincidentally, at this moment, Yun Jian said that she knew taekwondo. Hence, Qin Huan immediately came over to request a match. After saying that, Qin Huan felt that he was being rude again. He confidently added to Yun Jian, "Don't worry, I won't hurt you." This sentence proved that Qin Huan completely believed that he would definitely win if he competed with Yun Jian in taekwondo. Come. Upon hearing Qin Huan's words, Yun Jian, who originally didn't want to fight, spoke up. Then, she paused and tilted her head to look at Qin Huan under everyone's gaze. She said in disdain, "I'll say the ugly words first. I won't go easy on you." These words were considered a rebuttal to Qin Huan's arrogant words that said that he would definitely win. But after Qin Huan heard it, he was a little angry. He was the third prize winner of the National Youth Taekwondo competition. But today, he was actually looked down on by a skinny girl. Hence, after Yun Jian said those words, Qin Huan reached out and punched. He rushed towards Yun Jian as fast as he could and muttered, "Then I won't hold back." Qin Huan struck a few standard taekwondo moves. Just as he was about to raise his hand to suppress Yun Jian's arm, suddenly, a pair of hands that were as agile as a snake stretched out simply. Yun Jian held Xiao Yunju's hand and didn't move. One of her hands went around Qin Huan like a snake's body and went straight to his abdomen. Just as he thought that Yun Jian was going to punch him, Yun Jian suddenly kicked him horizontally. Bam! When everyone blinked again, they saw the aggressive Qin Huan being sent sprawling on the floor by Yun Jian in the next second. Chapter 455. After Yun Jian said this, she glared at Qin Huan, who was lying on the ground. She held Xiao Yunju's hand and walked over to Yun Yi's side. Yun Jian didn't use any strength in this move. It wasn't that she looked down on Qin Huan, but if his fancy, complicated, and impractical moves were to be used internationally, he would be beaten unconscious countless times. Qin Huan, who was knocked to the ground by Yun Jian, stood up with widened eyes in shock. He stared at Yun Jian in utter shock, as if he could not believe what had just happened. He didn't even know when she made her move. He was already lying on the ground. In contrast to Qin Huan's shock, Qin Li, who was proud of his son and bragging in front of his relatives and friends, was also stunned. All the relatives and friends present were dumbfounded. Everyone sucked in a deep breath. Especially those who felt that Yun Jian had founded a company at such a young age and looked down on Yun Jian because of Zhang Meihua's bragging. At this moment, they couldn't help but size up Yun Jian. Everyone knew that Qin Huan was the third prize winner of the National Youth Taekwondo competition. To be able to win a prize at the National Taekwondo competition was an amazing thing. But just now, a young lady subdued him in one move. That wasn't all. Yun Jian even directly pointed out that Qin Huan's moves were fancy and that he wasn't even worthy of being her opponent. What an arrogant and powerful young lady. As for the instigator, Qin Fenger, who was standing at the side, her eyes were about to pop out. How was that possible? How could Yun Jian defeat Qin Huan? Wait! At this moment, Qin Huan suddenly ran over to stop Yun Jian when he saw that she was about to stand to the side with Xiao Yunju. What? Yun Jian raised her brows and smiled. She didn't let go of Xiao Yunju's hand. Xiao Yunju also blinked his black eyes and sized up Qin Huan. He looked left and right at Qin Huan and shook his little head. This person was so ugly that he couldn't even be compared to his brother Ce. Qin Huan, who was being criticized by Xiao Yunju, didn't know what Xiao Yunju was thinking. He looked at Yun Jian with a serious expression. Qin Huan gritted his teeth and said, "How can you defeat me? I wasn't ready just now. I want to compete with you again." When Qin Huan said this, there was a sense of confidence that came from nowhere. Yun Jian's words just now had completely touched his pride as a man. Qin Huan felt that his manly pride had been severely insulted. Therefore, he wanted Yun Jian to compete with him again. "And what you used just now wasn't a taekwondo move. I want to compete with you in taekwondo, not other unorthodox ways." In order to win, Qin Huan continued, "Do you dare to compete with me?" Just now, Yun Jian defeated him in one move. This made Qin Huan feel that he had lost face in front of all his relatives. Therefore, Qin Huan was trying to make up for his embarrassment just now. Moreover, he was trying to convey to the surrounding people that he lost just now because Yun Jian didn't use taekwondo to fight with him. Although this reason was ridiculous, the surrounding relatives immediately helped Qin Huan. After all, most of the people present thought that boys had a better future than girls. No matter how powerful Yun Jian was, she was just a girl. His future achievements would always be limited. Chapter 456. With Qin Fenger's nonsense, Qin Huan became even more confident. Qin Huan suddenly felt that Yun Jian was using unorthodox methods to defeat him. After all, her hand speed was so fast just now, and she wasn't using taekwondo. If it was taekwondo moves, Qin Huan was very confident that he could defeat Yun Jian. Because he had learned taekwondo very well, including what moves his opponent would use, he had learned from his coach. At the same time, he also studied what moves his opponent would use and how he should defend against them. It could be said that Qin Huan was full of confidence within the range of taekwondo moves. Therefore, in order to regain his face, he invited Yun Jian to fight again. He was a national youth taekwondo expert. If it was taekwondo, could she do it? When Yun Jian heard Qin Huan's words, she couldn't help but chuckle. She was already merciful just now, but Qin Huan actually used the excuse that she didn't use taekwondo moves to fight with him. He wanted to fight with her again? Fight again? Yun Jian raised her brows. She smiled slightly, but her smile was full of disdain. That's right. Seeing the surrounding relatives looking at him, Qin Huan wasn't willing to accept the fact that he couldn't even defeat a thin girl like Yun Jian. Therefore, Qin Huan nodded fiercely. Seeing Qin Huan like this, Qin Li, who was standing at the side, knew that his son was serious. Huan, be gentle. Don't hurt the little girl, Qin Li even said to Qin Huan. Dad, of course. Qin Huan nodded confidently as if he had already won against Yun Jian when he said this. Qin Li and Qin Huan were indeed father and son. It was really unknown where their confidence came from. Yun Jian only smiled contemptuously. She handed Xiao Yunju's hand to her brother, Yun Yi, and let Yun Yi hold on to Xiao Yunju. Brother, hold on to Xiao Yunju first. With that, Yun Jian walked towards Qin Huan. Her long and narrow eyelashes fluttered up and down, and her delicate and beautiful face was as smooth as water. Her delicate and clean face caused everyone present to be stunned once again. Yun Jian's looks were indeed stunning. Otherwise, Yuan Yingjun wouldn't have been so obsessed with her back then. However, they saw the stunning girl standing in front of a group of people in the open space in Zhang Meihua's front yard. As she spoke, she blew out a breath of warm air. Reaching out, Yun Jian hooked her finger at Qin Huan. No matter how many times you try, whether it's taekwondo, sanda, or any other martial arts, as long as you can survive one move from me, you win. These words were considered a ruthless slap to Qin Huan's face. Yun Jian meant that he wouldn't even be able to take a single blow from her. Qin Huan spat fiercely, but he didn't have Yun Jian's boldness. He didn't dare to tell Yun Jian that as long as she could withstand one of his moves, she would win. Because from Yun Jian's moves just now, he could tell that she wasn't weak either. Ha! Qin Huan focused all his attention and roared. He clenched his fist and punched Yun Jian with all his might. This punch was much more powerful than the one Qin Huan used just now. Yun Jian's eyes flickered. She didn't move and watched as Qin Huan clenched his fist and rushed towards her. When Qin Huan's fist was only 10 centimeters away from her, Yun Jian suddenly tilted her head. She squatted down and spun around. In the next second, she actually circled behind Qin Huan in a strange posture. After that, Yun Jian lifted her leg and used an extremely standard taekwondo move to kick Qin Huan from behind to the ground. Everyone was stunned. Yun Jian's speed was simply unparalleled. It was much faster than the first time she beat Qin Huan up. So it turned out that she didn't display her true strength just now. Qin Huan was once again kicked to the ground like a dog gnawing on mud. At this moment, Yun Jian, who was standing behind Qin Huan, stretched out her slender right index finger in front of the astonished crowd. She smiled slightly and said with contempt, "One move." Chapter 457. Yun Jian didn't use any taekwondo moves just now, so Qin Huan found an excuse and even boasted that she wouldn't be able to win against him without using any taekwondo moves. At this moment, Qin Huan was speechless. In fact, Qin Huan, who was beaten down, was also stunned. He was beaten down by Yun Jian once again. And this time, everyone's eyes were bright. Everyone saw that Yun Jian had indeed used taekwondo moves to defeat him. Qin Huan completely broke down. He had been learning taekwondo since he was young, but now, he couldn't even compare to a girl who was smaller and weaker than him. If this were to spread, where would his face go? Qin Fenger, who originally wanted to use Qin Huan's ability to make Yun Jian suffer, was even more desperate. She gritted her teeth and glared at Yun Jian from the side. All right. It's just a small fight between two children. It's fine if you win or lose. Qin Huan, you're a man. It's normal for you to give in to a girl. Now, come and eat an apple. This apple is freshly cut. It's very fresh. At this moment, a plump middle-aged woman carrying a plate of freshly cut fruit walked out of the house and spoke as she walked. As she spoke, she called a group of people to eat the small pieces of apple. This middle-aged woman had just seen how Yunjian subdued Qin Huan in one move. But after the shock, she was very calm. In an instant, this plump middle-aged woman, who was half a head shorter than Yunjian, thought of the competition between Qin Huan and Yunjian. It was probably because Qin Huan was Yunjian's elder brother according to seniority that he let Yunjian win. This was what the middle-aged woman thought, so she directly said it out loud. After all, in this day and age, whether it was the villagers or the people in the city, they were used to elder brothers and sisters giving in to younger brothers and sisters. Sometimes, even if it wasn't the case, they would still say it was the case. Just like how Yunjian had beaten Qin Huan twice just now. In the eyes of this group of relatives, this plump middle-aged woman's words made them think that Qin Huan let Yunjian win because he let her win. However, only Qin Huan himself knew how terrifying Yunjian's strength was just now. After hearing what the middle-aged woman said, the crowd really thought that Qin Huan had gone easy on Yunjian, which was why Yunjian won. Yunjian just sneered at this. It was also at this time that the countryside's idea of favoring boys over girls, and that boys were always better than girls, was completely reflected. Yunjian had lived at the pinnacle of the world in her previous life. She had never experienced such a feeling before. However, it was undeniable that this feeling was definitely not pleasant. But Yunjian didn't care about that. Yunjian didn't say anything. She walked straight to Xiao Yunju and held Xiao Yunju's hand. A hurried voice could be heard, Aya, I'm late. I'm sorry everyone. Hearing the sound, he looked over and saw a police officer in uniform. It was obvious that he had just gotten off work and hadn't had time to take off his uniform. Seeing the person in police uniform, everyone was in awe out of habit. Yunjian narrowed her eyes. She was stunned when she saw this familiar face that suddenly appeared. When the other party saw Yunjian, he was also shocked. Then, this male police officer suddenly pointed at Yunjian and exclaimed in front of everyone, "Little girl, it's you. Aren't you the Advanced Special Forces soldier under Officer Go?" Chapter 458. The police officer's name was Zhang Shun. He was a police officer working at Xinjiang Town's police station. He was also the police officer that Yunjian had met when she visited Lu Fian and her mother at the police station to visit Lu Fian's father. It was just that he didn't think that he would be able to meet her here. Yunjian was only slightly stunned before she nodded at Zhang Shun. Zhang Shun was actually Qin Li's brother-in-law. He worked at Xinjiang Town's police station and had an easy life. Come to think of it, Zhang Shun and Zhang Meihua were considered distant relatives. Even Zhang Shun was not related to Yunjian by blood. Zhang Meihua had invited all her family and friends in Xinjiang Town to a banquet and Zhang Shun was one of the invitees. Unfortunately, Zhang Shun had just gotten off work and could not make it for dinner. Advanced Special Forces? Brother-in-law, what did you say? She is an Advanced Special Forces soldier? Qin Li and the others who were listening suddenly realized this. Qin Li turned to Zhang Shun and asked in horror. The moment everyone heard that Yunjian was an Advanced Special Forces soldier, they were so shocked that their mouths were agape. Everyone was waiting for Zhang Shun's reply. Zhang Shun obviously did not realize anything as he spoke even more highly of Yunjian. Hey, are you surprised? When I first found out that she's an Advanced Special Forces soldier, my reaction was similar to yours. But don't think that she's a member of the Advanced Special Forces under Officer Good just because she's young. This is an honor that others might not be able to achieve even if they work hard their entire lives. As he spoke, Zhang Shun took the opportunity to exclaim, "Do you know who Officer Gu is? He's Country Z's military genius. Even the country's general manager would want to get close to him." Gu Yunjian's status in Country Z was very high and Yunjian knew that too. However, from the words of others, he could hear a different flavor. Boom! Everyone present felt like their heads were about to explode. Yunjian actually had such an identity. She was actually an Advanced Special Forces soldier. At that moment, Qin Li was dumbfounded while everyone else was shocked. Qin Huan was completely stunned on the spot. It was no wonder that his skills were not good enough for her. No wonder she said that he wasn't worthy of being her opponent. She was an advanced special forces soldier. With such an identity, Yun Jian was destined to be different from the rest. Qin Huan was only good at taekwondo. Compared to the special forces in the army, he couldn't be compared at all. After all, no matter how good taekwondo was, the chances of actual combat were few and far between. On the other hand, the amount of training for an ordinary special forces soldier was enough to strike fear into the hearts of taekwondo practitioners. There was simply no comparison between the two. Especially those who had been in the army, they would have a murderous aura. What's wrong? Zhang Shun found that after he finished speaking, the people around him were dumbfounded, and he asked in confusion. If Zhang Shun knew that this group of people thought that Qin Huan had lost to Yun Jian on purpose and that Qin Huan had given in to Yun Jian, he might have laughed out loud on the spot. Yun Jian was an advanced special forces soldier who was personally certified by Gu Junjian. Such a young advanced special forces soldier. Did she need someone like Qin Huan to give in to her? Wasn't this a joke? At that moment, other than Qin Li, Qin Huan, and the rest whose faces were terrifyingly dark, the middle-aged woman who was holding the fruit platter and giving everyone slices of apple slices was also slapped hard in the face. Chapter 459. By the time everyone realized what was going on, Qin Yiru, Zhang Meihua, and the other women had already finished washing the dishes and cleaning the table. They walked to the empty space in front of the courtyard. What's going on? Why are all of you dumbfounded? What are you doing? Zhang Meihua and the other women asked in confusion when they saw the group of people standing in the open space staring at Yun Jian like they were in a daze. Mom, Yun Jian is an advanced special forces soldier. Do you know about this? Qin Liqian exclaimed and pointed at Yun Jian at Zhang Meihua. Advanced special forces soldier? Zhang Meihua and the other women who came out of the house were stunned as well. Other than Qin Yiru and Yun Yi who knew about it, everyone else was dumbfounded. How old was Yun Jian? She's only 15 years old. Advanced Special Forces Soldier? This was a title that had nothing to do with her at all, but now, this title followed closely by her side. Zhang Shun understood the reason when he saw the group's reaction. They did not believe that Yun Jian was an advanced Special Forces soldier. To convince them that Yun Jian was an advanced Special Forces soldier, Zhang Shun added, "The documents are here. I saw it with my own eyes." Officer Gu issued it himself. Even if the group did not believe it, they had no choice but to believe it. After that, the relatives looked at Yun Jian in a different way. There were a few older students like Yun Jian and Yun Yi present. They were the children of their relatives. They had brought them over because it was winter break. However, the young men and women who were about the same age as Yun Jian were silent throughout the meal. Before Yun Jian's appearance, Qin Huan was undoubtedly the most outstanding one in the group. Yun Jian's appearance immediately became the center of attention. From hearing that she had started a company to hearing that she was an advanced special forces soldier, everyone's emotions changed bit by bit. Although Yun Jian's identity as an advanced special forces soldier shocked everyone, it did not last long. Adults always like to brag about their own abilities. Therefore, after bragging about their own children's abilities, they began to talk about who had a car. Look over there. My family's car was bought from New Cruise. Including taxes and a series of documents, it cost about 100,000. A rich man boasted in front of everyone. Now, New Cruise had become the spokesperson for the automobile sales company that everyone was talking about. At the same time, Zhang Jifan had further acquired some smaller car sales companies to expand the company's authority. I'm planning to get a new car in a few days, Qin Li chimed in. Perhaps he could only find his sense of honor when it came to money and status. As for Yun Jian, she was more capable than her son, Qin Huan, but she had only started a small company. What use was? Old Qin, I have some dealings with New Cruise's CEO. Why don't I help you ask him out to tell you about the different models of cars in New Cruise? Someone could not help asking Qin Li. The chairman of New Cruise was Yun Jian while the CEO was Zhang Zhifan. Sure. That's a good idea. I was just worried that no one would give me a suggestion on what kind of car to buy. Qin Li pretended to be profound as he spoke. Qin Li clearly believed that not many people in the group could understand what he was saying. He wanted them to not understand so that he could continue boasting. I suggest you buy a Volkswagen. It's a local brand. New Cruise will have a Volkswagen promotion in a few days, Yun Jian suddenly chimed in. Half of Qin Li's reason for saying that was to show off. In spite of it, Yun Jian's sudden suggestion left him dumbfounded. Chapter 460. It was apparent that Yun Jian's words just now had made the person who was speaking feel a little smug about what she had just said feel repulsed. Especially since Yun Jian was so young, the person felt that Yun Jian was bossing others around and stealing his limelight at such a young age. He was even more displeased with her. Don't spout nonsense when you're still a kid. New Cruise isn't just any company. Besides, I have a friend who works in New Cruise. Of course, my friend would be the first to know if New Cruise is having an event. He'll definitely tell me the moment he gets the news. The person was full of confidence as he refuted Yun Jian's words with a rather arrogant tone. Moreover, the person's meaning was obvious. His friend worked in New Cruise. Even his friend had never heard of what Yun Jian said. Yun Jian was just spouting nonsense. Yun Jian turned to look at the man who accused her of spouting nonsense. He was about middle-aged with shifty-eyed eyes. Coupled with a face that was not even close to being handsome, he sent chills down one's spine just by looking at him. What was worse was that this person had red pustules on his face. He looked like he was not satisfied with his desires. Yun Jian glared at him and did not say anything else. Her words were directed at Qin Li, not this man who looked like he was not satisfied with his desires. Of course, it was not her business whether Qin Li listened to her or not. She was merely giving him a piece of advice. Qin Li was obviously stunned as well. However, compared to this shifty-eyed man who looked like he was not satisfied with his desires, Qin Li's gaze had a deeper depth to it. Then, they went on with their own words. Yun Jian, who was standing far away, could still hear the man who looked like he was complaining about her to the people around him. Say, even though she's in the advanced special forces at such a young age, she shouldn't think that she's invincible. What kind of company is New Cruise? It's a famous company in the country. She's just a little girl. Do you think she can reach into New Cruise? The dissatisfied man deliberately spoke loudly, as if he wanted everyone present to hear him reprimand Yun Jian, so that he could embarrass her. At this moment, Qin Yiru was also feeling rather awkward. Zhang Meihua opened her mouth. If not for Yun Jian's silence, Zhang Meihua would have revealed Yun Jian's identity as New Cruise's director. However, Yun Jian didn't say anything, and Zhang Meihua didn't dare to say anything. She was still waiting for Yun Jian to take care of her when she was old. How could he offend her so quickly? Yun Jian and her brother, Yun Yi, stood together. From time to time, she would tease Xiao Yunju, feeling very comfortable. It was as if what had just happened had never happened. Soon, the last trace of the golden sunset on the horizon had also disappeared. The sky was completely dark. The crowd had yet to disperse. Today was New Year's Eve, and every family was staying up late. The night of staying up late was long, so the adults had already set up the table and started playing mahjong at Zhang Meihua's house. The children, on the other hand, were following the women to set off the small firecrackers they bought from the small shop outside their house. Screech. Just then, the sound of a speeding motor was heard. The roar of a sports car resounded through Xinjiang town. What's that sound? Someone was surprised. What could be so loud? Isn't that the roar of a sports car? Looks like it's a sports car. Let's go, let's stand outside and take a look. The man with a face full of lust hurriedly pulled everyone outside. Chapter 461. These days, the number of cars in town could be counted with one hand. A high-class car like a sports car was even rarer. Therefore, when they heard the sound of a sports car, everyone ran out, wanting to see what the legendary sports car looked like. Seeing the black Lamborghini slowly drive into the corridor of the courtyard, no one was surprised. After all, it was normal for cars to pass through the aisles in front of their houses. I wonder which family in town this car belongs to. This car. I think it's a Lamborghini. This kind of car, the price is no less than $1 million. The man with a dissatisfied face was called Zhu Jie. At this time, Zhu Jie was pointing at the Lamborghini slowly driving into the courtyard, arrogantly speaking to the people around him. As he spoke, Zhu Jie couldn't help but sigh. This kind of car, if I could touch it in my life, it would be great. Hearing these words directly, outsiders would really think that Zhu Jie was a very humble person. However, those who knew him well understood that Zhu Jie's words meant that even people like him, who knew influential people and had a good family background, couldn't touch this high-class car. His group of poor relatives couldn't even think about it. Just as everyone was staring at the black Lamborghini passing through the aisles in the courtyard and was about to drive directly past Zhang Meihua's house, the car suddenly stopped. Huh? Zhu Jie let out a word of surprise. Under everyone's gaze, the door of the Lamborghini slowly opened, and a pair of slender legs were the first to appear. Then, a relatively young man came out from the driver's seat. The man was about 18 or 19 years old. He was very young, but he had a strong aura as soon as he appeared. He had a head of black hair and a fair and handsome face, which made all the women present blush. Qin Fenger had never seen such a handsome man. She thought that she had dated many boys, but in the end, they all parted on bad terms. Even her boyfriend, who was once called the most handsome boy in school, wasn't as handsome as this man in front of her. Qin Fenger felt her heart thumping wildly. Did this man see me and stop the car? Zhu Jie couldn't help but look at the man who suddenly appeared with admiration and couldn't help but twitch the corner of his mouth. Hello, little brother. Are you looking for directions? Zhu Jie had always been polite to rich and powerful people. When he saw Ce stop after getting out of the car, he thought that Ce was a foreigner. Now that it was the new year, there were many outsiders who went back to their hometown to give gifts to their relatives. Hence, Zhu Jie ran over, thinking himself clever and volunteered to lead the way for Ce. F*ck off, Ce uttered softly, hating people like Zhu Jie who sucked up to him as well. Ce told Zhu Jie to get lost. However, Zhu Jie was very perceptive. Even though he saw Ce's extreme reaction, he wasn't angry. Instead, he stood aside with a smile. Zhu Jie didn't dare to say much about the slander of the rich. Ce drove a Lamborghini, so his family was naturally wealthy. Zhu Jie expressed that he would never provoke such a person in his life. However, just as everyone was waiting suspiciously for Ce to guess his next move, Ce suddenly raised his slender legs and walked in front of Yunjian. I'm back, Ce's red lips curved. He said the most frightening thing in the world in a calm tone. Chapter 462. Only Yun-Yi, Qin Yiru, and Xiao Yunzhu knew Ce. However, Ce walked straight to Yunjian. It was as if Yunjian was the only person in his deep eyes. Yes. She replied calmly to Ce. Yunjian wasn't good at expressing her emotions, but her slightly raised eyebrows proved that she was excited. Ce Gidge. Xiao Yunzhu took the opportunity to run from Yunjian to Ce. Xiao Yunzhu was becoming more and more dependent on Ce. Every time he saw Ce, it was as if he had seen a delicious candy. He didn't even want his own sister and directly ran into Ce's arms. He was like a treasure hunter. Yunjian, Ce, and Xiao Yunzhu's daily interactions stunned everyone present. They didn't hear wrongly. Zhu Jie was just bragging about the value of this Lamborghini. It definitely wasn't less than 1 million yuan. How could a person who could take out 1 million yuan to buy a car be poor? It had to be known that in 1998, things were cheaper, and the monthly income of ordinary people wasn't high. At that time, if a person's monthly income was more than 1,000 yuan, it was already considered a high income. As for people who could spend 1,000,000 yuan to buy a luxury car, it could be said that there was no such person. Most importantly, the man driving this car was actually so familiar with Yun Jian. Yun Jian, CE, and Xiao Yunju stood together like a family. Everyone present was stupefied. As for Zhu Jie, who had just spoken rudely to Yun Jian, he was so ashamed that he was speechless. He didn't even dare to appear in front of Yun Jian and the others. Think about how he had just insulted Yun Jian. That tone. To be honest, Zhu Jie had never thought about how successful Yun Jian would be in the future. Even if she was capable, she was just a girl. There were a lot of things that minors were limited in doing. In Zhu Jie's mind, Yun Jian was just a girl. How capable could she be in the future? However, when Zhu Jie ran to CE to beg, he suddenly realized that CE actually knew Yun Jian. It was Zhu Jie's first time experiencing something so embarrassing. His expression darkened instantly. However, Zhu Jie didn't say anything else. "Ae, you're here? There's still a stool left, take a seat and rest." Qin Yiru walked over with a smile as she called out to CE affectionately. Then, Qin Yiru asked CE worriedly, "Ae, have you had dinner?" CE was holding Xiao Yunju's hand. He had rushed all the way back from an Han group because he had promised Yun Jian to come back and celebrate Chinese New Year with her. He had not rested for even a second on the way back, so of course, he hadn't eaten dinner. CE's hair fluttered as he shook his head at Qin Yiru. "No. You child. Why didn't you tell me you were coming over? You haven't even learned how to take care of yourself." "Fine, fine, Auntie will make you some noodles. You can't starve on an empty stomach, you'll get stomach problems if you go hungry for too long." Qin Yiru reprimanded CE like an elder reprimanding a junior before turning to make noodles for CE. CE's heart was warmed. The heartwarming scene between CE, Yun Jian, and the others took on a different meaning in Qin Fenger's eyes as her envy and jealousy intensified. Chapter 463. Qin Fenger simply couldn't stand Yun Jian, so she purposely raised her voice so that her friends and relatives would take a good look at Yun Jian. It would be best if they misunderstood that Yun Jian was CE's mistress. After all, when CE drove his Lamborghini, everyone assumed that he was a rich man's son. Other than those rich men who could buy anything they wanted, who else could afford a sports car that cost more than $1 million? In 1998, Country Z's economy had just started to take off. It was only in the 21st century that the economy started to pick up and gradually increased. The development of technology amazed everyone. However, one thing was for sure, in 1998, the prices of goods were still very cheap. Mistress? Before Yun Jian could say anything, CE had already raised his eyebrows. His handsome face was as if it had been carefully sculpted, as if it was a perfect masterpiece created by God himself, without the slightest flaw. What? Isn't that the case?" Qin Fenger replied confidently. Then, she suddenly thought of something and immediately said it. "It's New Year's Eve now. Why aren't you at home? Why are you here other than for Yun Jian?" Qin Fenger's words were even more firm. It was as if she had seen the entire scene. Some people even felt that Qin Fenger's words made sense. If Yun Jian and CE were a couple, shouldn't they have returned to Xinjiang town together? As for the current situation, CE had driven his Lamborghini to their doorstep. Based on what you said, aren't all the people who come to your house to look for you to keep you as their mistress? Yun Jian used a very clever example to refute Qin Fenger's words. Qin Fenger's words were indeed nonsense, but there were too many loopholes in her words. In the end, Yun Jian managed to turn the tables on her and retaliate. Yun Jian's words instantly caused everyone to burst into laughter. Everyone quickly realized that Qin Fenger's words had no evidence at all. If CE came here to look for Yun Jian, did that mean that she was his mistress? Didn't that mean that all the people who came to Qin Fenger's house were here to keep her as their mistress? It was because of Qin Fenger's simple and laughable way of thinking that everyone laughed. Ha ha ha, little girl, you're really interesting. Someone laughed and said to Yunjian. Yunjian only nodded slightly and smiled. She did not change her smile. When Yunjian said that, everyone present looked at Qin Fenger as if they were looking at an idiot. Qin Fenger was simply too brainless. How could she say something like that? Qin Fenger was trembling with anger, but she couldn't say anything in response. Qin Fenger was just talking nonsense, but she was forced by Yunjian to the point that she couldn't say a word. She was angry, but she didn't dare to say anything. There was still CE standing beside her. CE was obviously from a big family. No matter how powerful Qin Fenger was, she couldn't afford to offend her. Beep beep. At this moment, a few cars suddenly drove into the courtyard. Chapter 464. Among the cars that drove in, one of them was New Cruise's hottest-selling Volkswagen sedan from Country Z. Following closely behind was a military jeep. The two cars attracted a lot of attention as they drove in. At the same time, the two cars stopped at the courtyard entrance after CE. What the hell? What's going on today? Why are there so many cars parked here? Someone could not help exclaiming when they saw the scene. Zhang Meihua's courtyard was small and narrow. Accommodating CE's Lamborghini was already its limit, so the two cars were parked some distance away from the courtyard entrance. The reason why the person exclaimed was because in previous years, there were only a few small cars that could be seen in a small place like Xinjiang town. Today, 3 cars were parked in front of Zhang Meihua's courtyard entrance, completely stunning the crowd. Zhang Jifan, who got out of the Volkswagen sedan, felt as though he had just made a fortune and returned home. On the other hand, Zhang Jifan and his brothers were originally from Xinjiang town. However, their home was still in Xinjiang town. Another tall jeep also stopped in front of them. Then, a person got out of the jeep. Yunjian's eyes flashed. She narrowed them slightly, but there was a beautiful glow in her eyes. New Cruise's CEO. Oh my god, why is New Cruise's CEO here? Zhu Jie did not make a sound for a long time, but when Zhang Jifan spoke, he pointed at Zhang Jifan as though he had seen some shocking VIP. Hearing that Zhang Jifan, who had appeared out of nowhere, was New Cruise's CEO, everyone was shocked. Everyone present looked at him from head to toe. With New Cruise's recent fame and Zhang Jifan's hard-working management that was not afraid of hardships, New Cruise had become the representative of Country Z. There were even businesses overseas that were interested in collaborating with New Cruise. Therefore, there was no one present who did not know about New Cruise. New Cruise had become the representative of the country's automobile industry. Facing Zhang Jifan, the CEO of New Cruise, the group of people started to get excited. It was him. This middle-aged man was New Cruise's CEO. This news was simply too shocking. In contrast to the crowd's surprise, Zhang Jifan did not show any hint of arrogance. Of course, pride was a must. Hello. Qin Li was the first to reach Zhang Jifan. Wiping the back of his hands, he extended his hand to shake Zhang Jifan's hand in greeting. Qin Li's tone even carried a hint of inferiority. Hello. Zhang Jifan did not extend his hand to shake Qin Li's hand, nor did he express anything. Instead, he went to Yunjian after saying that. Then, Zhang Jifan's respectful voice rang. Sister Jian. He was already in front of Yunjian and nodded at Yunjian in greeting. In spite of it, everyone present was stunned when they heard him. Zhang Jifan was New Cruise's CEO. This was common knowledge. Logically speaking, someone who Zhang Jifan addressed as sister must be his immediate superior. It was also rumored that New Cruise's CEO was a young lady. No one knew what she looked like. In spite of it, Zhang Jifan's greeting and what Yunjian said earlier, could it be that Yunjian was the famous CEO of New Cruise? Qin Li was dumbfounded, so was Zhu Jie. Chapter 465. Yunjian nodded. Just as everyone was stunned for a few minutes, a person also got out of the jeep that had been following the Volkswagen all the way. It was Gu Junjian. Gu Junjian was dressed in formal casual attire. Without his military uniform, Gu Junjian looked valiant. Another person got out of the Volkswagen. He carried a huge pile of New Year's gifts and walked over with Gu Junjian. Gu Junjian's hands were full as well. He carried a huge bag of expensive Torea fragrance gifts. It was obvious that Gu Junjian and Zhang Jifan had come together. Both of them had rushed over on the first day of the new year to pay their New Year's greetings to Yunjian. The person who got out of the Volkswagen was Brother He, who had represented New Cruise at the dinner party hosted by Zhang Xiaofeng's father not long ago. Brother He and Gu Junjian were walking over together. Both of them were carrying many expensive New Year's gifts. Gu Junjian had gotten to know Zhang Jifan through Yunjian. Therefore, they had agreed to come to Xinjiang town to pay their New Year's greetings to Yunjian. Gu Junjian and Zhang Jifan were busy people. They would be so busy after the new year that they would not have time to pay their New Year's greetings. Therefore, they had come to Yunjian's hometown earlier to pay their New Year's greetings. Therefore, Yunjian did not know that they would come. Gu Junjian and Brother He walked to Zhang Meihua's door and placed the huge pile of gifts by the door sill. Everyone's eyes were glued to the gifts. They saw that the gifts that Zhang Jifan and Gu Junjian had brought were all expensive items. For example, the bag of Torea fragrance in Gu Junjian's hands. Although Torea fragrance was not the most expensive item, it was rare to see someone bring a huge bag of Torea fragrance to pay their New Year's greetings in 1998. It was obvious that they were not ordinary people. Sister Jian, there's a lot of work to do in the company after Lunar New Year, so we're here early to wish you a happy new year, Zhang Jifan explained looking at Yunjian. Yunjian nodded softly. At the same time, he also understood why Gu Junjian came with Zhang Jifan. Although Gu Junjian knew where Yunjian lived, he did not know that Yunjian was currently in Xinjiang town. Coincidentally, Zhang Jifan came from Xinjiang town, so he naturally knew where Yunjian lived. Therefore, the two of them hit it off and came together to give Yunjian a New Year's greeting. Gu Junjian was the leader of the advanced special forces. His high rank meant that he had to work all year round. Now that he was free, he had delegated his work to his subordinates to spare time to pay Yunjian a happy New Year's visit. Yunjian was glad to see Zhang Jifan and Gu Junjian. Come in and have a seat. Yunjian smiled and invited them into the house. Ce stayed by Yunjian's side and Xiao Yunju's hand was held tightly by Ce. This was obviously Zhang Meihua's house, but it was more like Yunjian's place to receive important guests. In spite of it, Zhang Meihua did not say a word. This was New Cruise's CEO. Zhang Meihua could not wait to suck up to him. How could she not be happy? After making tea for the group, Zhang Meihua asked for tea eggs to be cooked for them. At that moment, Qin Li, Zhu Jia, and the others were ignored like they were outsiders. Chapter 466. The fearful voice came from Zhang Shun. Who was Zhang Jifan? Everyone present knew him. He was New Cruise's CEO. However, in comparison, who was Gu Junjian? No one present knew him. However, Zhang Shun's fearful words drew everyone's attention to Gu Junjian. The fact that New Cruise's CEO came personally to wish Yunjian a happy new year was already impressive enough. However, Yunjian was New Cruise's CEO after all. It was only natural for a subordinate to wish his superior a happy new year. Zhang Shun was a junior police officer in Xinjiang town's police station while Gu Junjian was the nationally renowned captain of the advanced special forces. That meant he was Zhang Shun's superior. Perhaps the people present did not pay attention to the special forces, but Zhang Shun was a part of it himself. Someone as famous as Gu Junjian would naturally have seen his photo before. Therefore, when Zhang Shun saw Gu Junjian's photo, his face turned green with fright. This was the nationally renowned officer Gu. No matter how powerful Yunjian was, she was only an advanced special forces soldier. Moreover, the advanced special forces soldiers were quite a number. Even if it was the new year, Officer Gu could not possibly wish his subordinates a happy new year one by one. What did he ask for? However, as an officer, he had the time to wish Yunjian a happy new year? This was not a joke. In the military, unless one was an extremely outstanding member, it was impossible for one to receive such treatment. A superior officer personally came to their home with gifts to wish them a happy new year. Naturally, the people around them heard Zhang Shun's thoughts. Previously, Zhang Shun had told them about Gu Yunjian's identity as Officer Gu. He was a VIP that even the country's CEO would approach. Country Z's military prodigy. He actually came all the way here to wish Yunjian a happy new year. Naturally, everyone present was well aware of the stakes involved. Especially Qin Li, Qin Huan, Zhu Jia, and the rest who were disdainful of Yunjian. They were completely dumbfounded. If they were already stunned when they heard that Yunjian was a member of the advanced special forces, the shock they felt now was indescribable. However, while everyone was still in shock, Gu Junjian had already nodded at Zhang Shun in a friendly manner. He smiled and said politely, "Hello." This greeting made Zhang Shun's mood surge. Gu Junjian, a military genius and the highest-ranking special forces officer in Z country, was actually trying to curry favor with him. Zhang Shun was so excited that he didn't know what to say. At this time, Gu Junjian had already bypassed Zhang Shun's field of vision. He looked directly at Qin Yiru and praised Yunjian. At the same time, he took out a golden octagonal star medal from his pocket and handed it to Yunjian. After verification, when the international god stole the antique jade pendant from Jia province, your team monarch unanimously agreed that you were the one who led everyone to complete the mission. Therefore, I'm here this time with the approval of the higher-ups to reward you with this medal. The golden octagonal medal was very eye-catching. Gu Junjian placed the medal on the table and pushed it to Yunjian. Yunjian pursed her red lips and accepted it. The antique was stolen by the international god? And Yunjian was the one who recovered it? Oh my god, that's the international god. She actually was capable of that. Qin Li was shocked before he could finish his sentence. Now that the mission was completed, the theft of Country Z's antique from Jia province was no longer a secret. Instead, it became Yunjian's honor for completing the mission. However, the moment Gu Junjian gave the honor to Yunjian, Qin Li was stunned. Qin Huan was the most horrified. He had wanted to compete in Taekwondo with Yunjian in an attempt to defeat her and show off his prowess. Chapter 467. In contrast to Qin Li and Qin Huan's shock, Qin Yiru and Yun Yi were stunned as well. Qin Yiru and Yun Yi were Yunjian's closest kin, but Yunjian's change was gradual. When did Xiao Jian become so amazing? Qin Yiru and Yun Yi were stupefied on the spot. Qin Yiru was at a loss for words. Her daughter had changed again, but as her mother, she had no idea. Yun Yi, on the other hand, looked at Yunjian in shock and said in disbelief, "Xiao Jian, Yunjian is excellent. She has the talent to be a special forces soldier too. I, Gu Junjian, have been in the military for decades and have trained countless young special forces candidates, but this is my first time encountering someone as amazing as her. There's no other like her." Gu Junjian interrupted Yun Yi and guffawed, giving the highest compliment he had ever given in his life. She was able to make Officer Gu give such an astounding evaluation. Everyone present could not help shuddering again. Was Yunjian really that good? Looking at the disbelieving gazes of everyone present on Yunjian, Gu Junjian joked, "Why don't you believe me? You guys haven't seen her skills. TSK. I, Gu Junjian, swear on my honor that even the veteran members of the advanced special forces who have been on missions for decades don't have 1/10 of her ability." This was the difference. Gu Junjian had never lied nor had he belittled his veteran subordinates by praising Yunjian. It was Yunjian who had the ability. She had the ability to live up to his praise. Officer Gu, you flatter me, Yun Jian said with a smile, lowering her gaze. At this moment, everyone present could no longer describe their shock with words. Of course, that was excluding Ce and Xiao Yunju, who was shaking his head nonchalantly. Since Gu Junjian had said so, Yun Jian was naturally capable. Qin Yiru was shocked as well. Both she and Yun Yi knew that Yun Jian was in the advanced special forces and received daily training, sometimes even going out on missions. Every time Yun Jian went out on a mission, Qin Yiru would tell her that her life came first and that she must come back safely. Qin Yiru, however, did not expect Xiao Jian's missions to be so difficult. From Gu Yunjian's words, Qin Yiru knew that Xiao Jian's ability had reached such a terrifying level. Mom, I don't take risks when I go out on missions. I'll only take action when it's completely safe. You don't have to worry about that. Yun Jian looked at Qin Yiru and saw through her worries. Qin Yiru was not proud of Yun Jian but worried that something would happen to her when she went on such a dangerous mission. Hearing Yun Jian's assurance, Qin Yiru's frown eased a little. Don't worry. Every mission I assign is based on their ability. If she doesn't have the ability to complete the mission perfectly, I won't assign her to it. Gu Junjian assured Qin Yiru as well. Qin Yiru looked up and glanced at Gu Yunjian's handsome face before nodding and telling him softly in a pleading tone, Officer Gu, please take care of my Xiao Jian. This was a mother's worry for her child. Gu Junjian nodded. In contrast to Qin Yiru's worry, Ce was not bothered at all. Chapter 468. With Gu Yunjian's assurance, Qin Yiru felt much more at ease. Of course, she was also overjoyed after she calmed down. The joy came from Yun Jian's excellence. She was Yun Jian's mother. Hearing Gu Yunjian's praise, Qin Yiru, as Yun Jian's mother, was naturally proud. At this moment, Qin Li and the others, who had been completely ignored, continued to dejectedly bid their farewells. They didn't have the face to stay here anymore. Zhang Meihua did not ask them to stay as she watched them leave. She was busy entertaining Yun Jian, Gu Junjian, and Zhang Jifan, so she did not even have the time to send them off. Zhang Meihua was a practical person. She would hook up with whoever was successful. Before Gu Junjian and the rest came, Qin Li, who was a high-ranking official in Jia province, had undoubtedly become the center of attention. Zhang Meihua, of course, fawned over him. Now that she saw Gu Junjian, Zhang Jifan, and Yun Jian, who were many times more powerful than Qin Li, she did not even bother to take the time to send them off. After they left behind a pile of tea leaves, eggshells, melon seed shells, peanut shells, and so on that were used to entertain guests during the Lunar New Year. The guests she entertained today were actually the same as the guests she entertained during the Lunar New Year. Qin Yiru and Zhang Meihua cleared everything on the table while Gu Junjian and Zhang Jifan bid farewell and left. It was already 9 o'clock at night. Time passed quickly as the group chatted away. It would take at least 2 hours to return to Longmen City from Xinjiang town, so it was almost 11 when Gu Junjian and Zhang Jifan returned. Why don't you all stay for the night? There are enough rooms at home. It was Qin Yiru's first time asking people to stay as the host since she returned to her parents' home. If it had been before, Qin Yiru would not have dared to say so. Zhang Meihua's house was actually the house of Yun Jian's uncle, Qin Liqian. Zhang Meihua and her late husband, Qin Youfu, had left this house behind because daughters were all going to get married when they grew up and they only had one son. It was reasonable that this house became Qin Liqian's property. A married daughter was like spilled water. Since Qin Yiru was married, there was no reason for her to return to her parents' home. Actually, even if Qin Yiru came back, she would incur his sister-in-law's displeasure. Qin Liqian was a married man now. Even if Zhang Meihua was still around, Qin Yiru could still stay with her parents for a while after the divorce. However, if Zhang Meihua was gone too, it would be awkward even if Qin Yiru wanted to come back in the future. This was the reality of rural people. Therefore, it was important for a girl to choose a good husband when she got married. Having an elder brother in her parents' home meant that it was impossible for her to return to her parents' home for a long period of time after the divorce. Qin Yiru had been forced to put up with Yun Gang's gambling addiction back then because she did not know where to go after the divorce. However, it was when Yun Gang's affair was exposed and her daughter and son strongly supported her divorce that Qin Yiru mustered her courage to cut ties with Yun Gang. "I still have things to deal with at the company, so I won't stay." Zhang Jifan smiled apologetically at Qin Yiru's request to stay. Chapter 469. The joy that Gu Junjian displayed was the thrill of having a duel between experts. Honestly speaking, Gu Junjian had had this thought for a long time. It was not that he wanted to defeat Yun Jian, but he liked the thrill of dueling with an expert. It had been a long time since Gu Junjian met a decent opponent, and it had been a long time since he wanted to challenge someone one-on-one like he did today. Gu Junjian's challenge was completely different from Qin Huan's. Qin Huan wanted to challenge Yun Jian purely because he wanted to put on airs in front of everyone. Gu Junjian, on the other hand, wanted to duel with Yun Jian because of Yun Jian's ability. To Gu Junjian, only a duel between two experts was the true meaning. The biggest difference between Gu Junjian and Qin Huan was that Gu Junjian would not find an excuse or feel indignant even if he lost. "Sister Jian, I'll be leaving with old He then," Zhang Jifan told Yun Jian with a smile. Yun Jian nodded at Zhang Jifan and watched as Zhang Jifan and old He reversed their car and left. It was only then that Yun Jian turned to look at Gu Junjian with a glint in her eyes. "I accept." Gu Junjian was considered an expert, and Yun Jian would never underestimate an invitation from an expert. Jijia, what's a duel?" "Xiao Zhu wants a lollipop now." Right after Yun Jian said that, Xiao Yunzhu, who stood beside Ce, tugged at Yun Jian's sleeve and looked at Yun Jian pitifully. "Take Xiao Zhu to the shop to buy lollipops." Ce shoved Xiao Yunzhu's hand into Yun Jian's right in front of Gu Junjian and the others and even grabbed Yun Jian's hand. Yun Jian was about to say that she had just accepted Gu Junjian's challenge and wanted to duel with him. As if he knew what she was thinking, Ce turned his exquisite side profile to face Gu Junjian. There was an unusual golden glow between his sharp brows as he glanced at Gu Junjian and said, "I'll duel with you on her behalf." Ce was not asking for Yun Jian or Gu Junjian's opinion when he said that. He was only announcing the fact that he was going to duel with Gu Junjian in place of Yun Jian. Gu Junjian was stunned for a few seconds when he saw Ce suddenly stand up and say that he was going to duel with him on Yun Jian's behalf. Gu Junjian already had some understanding of Yun Jian's strength. However, Gu Junjian was unable to guess the bottom line of Yun Jian's strength. Therefore, Gu Junjian had another intention when he proposed to duel with Yun Jian. He wanted to test Yun Jian's strength. He wanted to test how strong Yun Jian was. Unexpectedly, Ce, who had been standing behind Yun Jian and holding Xiao Yunzhu's hand, said that he wanted to duel with him on Yun Jian's behalf. More importantly, Gu Junjian saw an unusual glint in this 19-year-old man's eyes. Gu Junjian did not dare to recklessly guess Ce's identity. Ce did not give Gu Junjian any chance to reject him either. "Alright, I'll take Xiao Zhu to buy some lollipops." Yun Jian did not see the golden glint in Ce's eyes. When Xiao Yunzhu held her hand and looked at her with pitiful eyes, Yun Jian pulled Xiao Yunzhu's hand and walked towards a shop near Xinjiang town. Before they left, they did not forget to bid farewell to Ce and Gu Junjian. Qin Yiru was not downstairs at the moment, so she did not see this. Since Gu Junjian and Ce were still there, she and Zhang Meihua went to tidy up the empty bed. Chapter 470. In other words, only Ce, Gu Junjian, and Yun Yi were left in front of the courtyard. As for Qin Fenger, she had been sent back to her room by Zhang Meihua after she spoke rudely to Yun Jian. Qin Fenger was not afraid of anyone but her grandmother, Zhang Meihua. Therefore, she ran away in a huff when Zhang Meihua spoke. In fact, if not for that, Qin Fenger, who had been courting death, would have been in trouble. Yun Jian might have just let it go. As long as Qin Fenger did not cross the line, she would not have done anything to her. However, Ce was still around. Anyone who dared to humiliate Ce's woman would end up in a terrible state. It was just like Lu Xiuxiu who wanted to frame Yunjian back then. Lu Xiuxiu had schemed to humiliate Yunjian by taking a video of Yunjian with other men to humiliate her. In the end, she had been sold into a brothel by Ce's men. Ce was not a good person. He would kill anyone who dared to bully his woman, even if they were women. A gentleman did not hit a woman. That was a lie made up by useless people. If he could stand by and do nothing when his woman was being bullied, then he would not be Ce. He would be called a coward. Yunjian was not there for what happened after that. She was already holding Xiao Yunju's hand and walking towards the small shop in Xinjiang town. The small shops in Xinjiang town were usually open until 10 p.m. That was because the townspeople usually went to bed after 8 o'clock. The shop had been open for a long time to be able to stay open until 10 p.m. However, today was an exception because it was New Year's Eve. Other than young children, everyone would stay up until the New Year. This was especially true for children after the age of 7 or 9. They were the most interested in staying up until the New Year and asking for red packets. At 12 p.m. on New Year's Eve, firecrackers were a trend in the townspeople. Before 12 o'clock in the evening, many people came to the store to buy firecrackers and candles. Therefore, small shops that knew a little about business would stay open on New Year's Eve until 12 o'clock before closing. These things and common sense were things that Yunjian had never heard or experienced in her previous life. Yunjian, who wandered around the edge of the world and was always on guard against the people around her, would be killed if she was not careful. She had never lived the comfortable life of a normal girl. Therefore, Yunjian cherished everything she had now. Yunjian held Xiao Yunju's hand and went to a small shop not far away. This was the shop where Yunjian had called Tiger Leopard from the Kosha mercenaries when she had just been reborn. The owner of this shop was an old man. Yunjian had been to this shop when she had just been reborn. At that time, the shop owner had casually asked her, "What do you want to buy?" Today, Yunjian held Xiao Yunju's hand and stepped into the shop again. The shop owner glanced over and recognized Yunjian immediately. He even shouted in surprise, "Hey, aren't you the little girl who called my shop a few months ago?" Yunjian blinked. She held Xiao Yunju's hand and walked into the shop. She asked curiously, "You know me?" Chapter 471. Yunjian smiled awkwardly when she heard the store owner's exaggerated words. So this was how he remembered her. "Oh, by the way, young lady, are you here to make a phone call again?" The shop owner sat down and asked Yunjian after he recovered from his agitated state just now. "No." Yunjian shook her head and led Xiao Yunju into the store. Then, she turned to the store owner and grinned. "I'm buying snacks with my brother today." She wasn't doing strange things. When Yunjian was reborn, she was always at the top of the world, so Yunjian was unfamiliar with the world. She always did things her own way in her previous life, so she followed her own personality when she was reborn. However, after living here for a while, Yunjian realized that it wasn't advisable to do that. "Oh, okay. Pick whatever you want." The store owner laughed heartily and nodded. Yunjian held Xiao Yunju's hand and walked around the store. Someone came to buy fireworks outside, so the store owner went out to take care of it. Midnight on New Year's Eve was the time when the fireworks were the loudest. However, it was only 9 o'clock, which meant that it was the time when the fireworks were the quietest. Every year on New Year's Eve, 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock, and 11 o'clock were the quietest times. Just like the darkness before dawn, the quieter it was now, the noisier the fireworks would be when it was 12 o'clock. Yunjian let Xiao Yunju pick a big bag of snacks, Lay's potato chips, bubble gum, lollipops. Xiao Yunju picked a few lollipops alone. Xiao Yunju picked as he muttered, strawberries for brother Ce, blueberries for sister, lychees for Yun-E. Her small hand picked through the pile of lollipops stuck in the box. Yun Jian wasn't a patient person, but she was very patient with Xiao Yunju. In the end, Yun Jian patiently accompanied Xiao Yunju to pick out his favorite snacks. After paying, they walked to Zhang Meihua's house. Although it wasn't far from Zhang Meihua's house, they still had to cross a few streets. At this time, every house was brightly lit, so there was no need to walk in the dark. Bang, pa, at this moment, in the silence, there were fireworks. At this time, there would also be people setting off fireworks, but it was a minority. Yun Jian narrowed her eyes. She held Xiao Yunju's hand and walked around an aisle. Coincidentally, a family in this aisle was setting off fireworks. It was not yet 12 o'clock. Most of the fireworks at this time were to worship the gods and pray for blessings in the coming year. Most of the villagers were superstitious, while the people of Longmen City were used to worshipping the gods with animals like pigs' heads, chickens, and ducks. At the same time, they would also burn some Buddhist scriptures during the worship. These were the customs passed down from the older generation. Yun Jian held Xiao Yunju's hand and walked along the edge. When the fireworks were over, just as Yun Jian and Xiao Yunju were about to cross the aisle, a group of mischievous children ran out with matches, lighters, and small firecrackers. "Look, there's a bad guy walking past us. Quick, blow them up. Blow them up." One of the children, who looked arrogant and domineering, pointed at Yun Jian and Xiao Yunju. A boy with a crew cut grabbed a bunch of small firecrackers and lit them as fast as he could, throwing them at Yun Jian and Xiao Yunju. Chapter 472. Yun Jian's eyes lit up when she came out to buy some snacks and encountered such a situation. "Sister." Xiao Yunju panicked. He grabbed Yun Jian's sleeve in fear, and his small and stubborn body stood in front of Yun Jian, wanting to block the pile of small firecrackers for Yun Jian. Xiao Yunju was still young, but people were sensitive to danger. It was especially so for Yunju, whose experience in his past life had sharpened his sense of danger. When danger came, Xiao Yunju's first reaction was to block it for Yun Jian. "Xiao Zhu, come here." Yun Jian shouted softly. She took Xiao Yunju and pulled Xiao Yunju to the side while she dodged to the side. Her quick and efficient movements made the parents of the naughty children, who were anxiously watching the situation from afar, shocked. She had made a turn to the side to avoid the attack, her speed unbelievably fast. After all, this group of naughty children had just lit the small firecrackers and thrown them at her, but Yun Jian easily dodged and took Xiao Yunju to avoid the big pile of small firecrackers. "Wow, that's amazing." At this moment, even the little boy with the crew cut, who had just lit the small firecrackers and threw them at Yun Jian and Xiao Yunju, opened his mouth wide in surprise. He looked as if he had seen something amazing and looked straight at Yun Jian. However, before the little boy with the crew cut could finish his sentence, he was slapped on the head by his parent. "How did I teach you? I bought you small firecrackers and you learned to do bad things?" The little boy with the crew cut's mother hit him a few times and then took away all the small firecrackers in his hands. "No more playing. Hurry up and apologize to big sister." The crew cut boy's mother took away the pile of small firecrackers and rushed the group of people to Yun Jian to apologize. The naughty children were restrained by their parents and they all apologized unwillingly. Yun Jian only glanced at them and did not say whether she accepted the apology or not. She pulled Xiao Yunju away. The naughty children's mother did not say much. By the time Yun Jian brought Xiao Yunju back to Zhang Meihua's house, a small square folding table was already set up outside Zhang Meihua's house. There were two people sitting on the left and right sides of the table, and one person standing next to the table. The people sitting on the left and right were naturally Gu Junjian and Ce. The one standing was Yun Yi. She did not know if their practice session had ended, but she saw that Gu Junjian was excitedly sitting opposite Ce to sit on the bench and play chess. The practice session between the two of them was probably over. Yun Jian held Xiao Yunju's hand and walked over. She saw that Gu Junjian was looking at Ce excitedly and respectfully as they played chess. "You're back. Ce tilted his head and asked Xiao Yunju. At the same time, he looked up at Yunjian. Because Ce was sitting on a stool, he could only look up at her. Yes. Yunjian nodded slightly. Ce smirked, his lips curving into a faint smile that was refreshing and comforting just by looking at it. Brother Ce, someone used small firecrackers to bomb me and my sister. Xiao Yunju pouted as he felt wronged. This could be seen from Xiao Yunju's expression. He was very unhappy. Yes? Ce withdrew his thoughts from the chessboard. He turned his head and sized up Xiao Yunju and Yunjian. He only relaxed when he saw that they were fine. Gu Junjian could not help but secretly laugh when he saw this. If he guessed correctly, Ce did not want Yunjian to play with him because he was afraid that he would come into contact with Yunjian. Chapter 473. Xiao Yunju liked Brother Ce because Brother Ce would help him. He would buy him candy and toys to play with. Children were lively by nature and would rely on whoever treated them well. Xiao Yunju pouted and told him everything that had happened. Xiao Yunju sounded like he was about to cry after being bullied. When Ce heard that someone had used firecrackers to bomb Xiao Yunju and Yunjian, his long fingers, which had been playing chess, stopped moving. He retracted his hand and stood up from the stool. He strode over to Xiao Yunju with his long legs. He looked up and lowered his eyes to look at Xiao Yunju. There was a glint of anger in his eyes. Who bombed you? Ce asked after a few seconds of silence. Coincidentally, Gu Junjian saw Ce suddenly stop playing chess with him. He picked up a cup of tea out of boredom and blew on it twice to drink some tea. However, when he heard Ce's words, he nearly choked on the tea in his throat. Once Gu Junjian was reminded of Ce's terrifying skills and his wife-protecting demeanor, as well as what he had said just now, the atmosphere in the room was strangely subtler. He felt that his words did not match Ce's frightening skills. I'm not injured. It's just a prank by a bunch of naughty kids. When Yunjian heard Ce's words, she guessed that if she didn't explain herself, he would bring Xiao Yunju over to those naughty kids' houses. Ce was indeed that kind of person. He was extremely protective and his personality was just like hers. However, it was New Year's Eve and the whole family was happily staying up for the new year. If Ce really went over to their houses, Qin Yiru and the others would probably be shocked and the matter would blow up. It was a good new year, so they naturally had to be happy. As expected, when Ce heard Yunjian's words, he immediately retracted his vicious gaze. Young man, come on. Let's continue playing chess. With Yunjian's skills, you don't have to worry about her. Haha. Gu Junjian extended his hand to greet Ce with a hint of mockery in his voice. Ce and Yunjian were really a good match. TSK, both of them were terrifyingly skilled. It looked like his old bones couldn't take it anymore. Ce reached out his hand to rub Xiao Yunju's short hair. He took a deep look at Yunjian before he sat down in front of Gu Junjian with a smile on his face. The two continued to play chess. The New Year's Eve was long, but it wasn't lonely. Xiao Yunju pulled Yunjian to sit beside Ce and watched as Ce played chess. His little hand was still holding on to Lay's potato chips as he munched on them. Midway through the game, Xiao Yunju even put the potato chips in front of Yunjian and said to her, "Sister, you eat." Yunjian nodded happily. Xiao Yunju also gave Gu Junjian and Yunyi his favorite potato chips before passing them to Ce. Brother Ce, you eat. I'm playing chess. Xiao Zhu, feed me. Ce revealed a devilish smile. One of his hands was empty, but he didn't reach out to take the potato chips himself. Yunjian was sitting beside Ce while Xiao Yunju's little hands were barely hanging onto the folding table beside Yunjian. Then sister will feed brother Ce. Xiao Yunju couldn't reach Ce's side. His little hand could only reach in front of Yunjian. He reached out but couldn't reach Ce, so he said to Yunjian. Gu Junjian, who was sitting opposite him, was speechless. Yun-yi, who was standing at the side, was speechless. Yunjian's mouth twitched. Xiao Yunju still didn't know what was going on and stretched out his hand again. Sister, hurry up. Xiao Zhu's hand is sore from holding the potato chips. When Yunjian heard that Xiao Yunju's hand was sore, she immediately picked up a potato chip and fed it to Ce. Chapter 474. He dared to be so impudent in front of Gu Junjian and her brother, Yun-yi. Warmth flowed through Yunjian's heart, but it was tinged with a tinge of annoyance. Ce smiled faintly when he saw her reaction. His handsome face revealed a sinister smile. Yun-yi, who was standing by the side, also smiled sinisterly. This was his brother-in-law, whom he had personally tested. If Yunjian heard what Yun-yi was thinking, she would definitely hiss. It's delicious. She heard Ce's comment out of the blue before his lips curled. His flawlessly handsome face arched a brow as he uttered, I want more. Yunjian was speechless. Why didn't she realize that he loved eating potato chips so much? At this moment, Xiao Yunju had already placed the bag of potato chips in front of Yunjian. Sister gave it to him. Brother Ce said that he wants more. Yunjian quietly took out the bag of potato chips and placed it next to Ce's lips again. Strangely, the person who ate the most potato chips was Ce. When there were only a few mouthfuls left, Xiao Yunju hugged the bag of potato chips and refused to give it to Ce. He even pouted and said, Brother Ce, you're bad. You eat the most. Sister bought this for Xiao Zhu. You're not allowed to snatch it away. As he spoke, Xiao Yunju pouted and refused to let go of the bag of potato chips. After you finish this bag, I'll buy you 100 more. Ce made a chess move. While Gu Junjian was thinking about the next move, he stretched out his arm and flicked Xiao Yunju's forehead with his slender fingers. Xiao Yunju's eyes immediately lit up. He asked happily, really? Brother Ce, will you buy it for Xiao Zhu later? I'll go after this game. Ce lowered his eyes and smiled. Yay! Sister will feed these to Ce Gij. Xiao Zhu will go buy more later. Xiao Yunju was quickly bought over. He handed the bag of chips to Yunjian and clapped his hands excitedly. Yunjian looked at the remaining bag of chips and suddenly had the urge to facepalm and sigh. After a while, the game ended. Ce defeated the last general on Gu Yunjian's side with the chess piece in his hand and won the game. Young man, no matter what, I'm still your elder. No matter what, you have to give in to me. Gu Junjian shouted in distress. Thanks for letting me win. Ce stood up. His hair was fluttering in the evening breeze. He pursed his lips and his handsome face was asking for a beating. I'm not playing anymore. Gu Junjian spread out his hands and shouted. Ce also had the same thought. He smiled slightly and walked over to Xiao Yunju's hand and pulled him toward the store. When they left, Xiao Yunju was holding Yunjian's hand. Thus, Ce dragged Yunjian to the store through Xiao Yunju. I'm old. I'm useless. Gu Junjian smiled awkwardly and stood up. Yun-yi also smiled and nodded at Gu Junjian. Coincidentally, Qin Yiru had already made the bed and came downstairs. Mom, I'll go upstairs first. When Yun-yi saw Qin Yiru coming down, there was no one left to entertain Gu Junjian. He said and went to his room. Oh, okay. Qin Yiru nodded. Thus, only Gu Junjian and Qin Yiru were left downstairs. Chapter 475. I won't compromise. I won't compromise. Haha. Gu Junjian laughed heartily as he was quite frank about it. Gu Junjian didn't want Qin Yiru to think that he was trying to appease her, so he sighed and said, Don't think that I'm so noble. I'm just like those of us from the special forces. What kind of place haven't we slept in? How could there be a big bed when we're out in the wild? It's like using the sky as your room and the ground as your bed. Hee, I'm used to it. Gu Junjian wasn't trying to get Qin Yiru to sympathize with him, but he was trying to convey that he wasn't a spoiled person. He wouldn't dislike this place just because the living conditions were bad. Officer Gu, you're also someone with a story. Qin Yiru smiled, but her expression wasn't as stiff as before. Gu Junjian was easy to get along with, so Qin Yiru didn't feel pressured. That's right. Who doesn't have a story when they're at our age? Gu Yunjian's smile weakened a little. He seemed to have recalled some sad memories. That's right. Qin Yiru rubbed the back of her hands. Standing in the courtyard, the cold wind outside still made her shiver. Officer Gu, let's go inside quickly. It's windy outside. Look, I didn't treat you well. I forgot that you were playing chess in the courtyard. The wind is so cold. Let's go inside quickly. Qin Yiru suddenly remembered that Gu Junjian and Ce had moved stools and folding tables outside to play chess. It wasn't that cold outside, and there were lights outside Zhang Meihua's house. Gu Junjian was playing chess just now, so he forgot that he was still in the courtyard. However, after Qin Yiru reminded him, he immediately felt a little cold. He nodded and said, that's good. I was playing chess so well that I forgot that I'm already numb from the cold. I'm getting old. As he spoke, Gu Junjian helped Qin Yiru put away the folding table, low stool, and other things into the house. Gu Junjian was an upright person. When Qin Yiru packed up her things and wanted to move the folding table and other clumsy things back into the house, he rushed to help her. Qin Yiru immediately had a good impression of Gu Junjian. Moreover, it was still early, so Yunjian and Ce brought Xiao Yunju to shop at the store. After Zhang Meihua finished packing, she went to Xinjiang town's town hall for a square dance. In this era, square dancing had already begun to sprout. As for Qin Liqian and his family, they were already nestled in their beds. They did not stay up for the new year as sleeping late was not good for their health. Furthermore, they cared about their health, so they went to bed early. Coincidentally, there was no one around and they had nothing to do. Seeing that Ce, Yunjian, and Xiao Yunju were not around, and Yun Yi had also returned to her room, Qin Yiru simply moved a stool over and started chatting with Gu Junjian in the house. They talked about their lives, their past, and their experiences. Qin Yiru and Gu Junjian were people who had spent half their lives, so naturally, they had experienced many things. They would not have known if they did not ask, but after asking, they found out that Gu Junjian had already divorced his ex-wife. The reason was that he was in the military and could not stay at home all year round to accompany his wife and son. His wife could not stand it and ran away with another man. There was only one son left in the family. However, his son was currently studying abroad and would not return home for the new year. Therefore, even if it was the eve of the new year, when he reunited with his family, Gu Junjian felt that it did not matter whether he went home or not. Because if he went home, he would be the only one in the large and empty villa. Chapter 476. After listening to Gu Yunjian's experience, Qin Yiru could also feel a trace of sadness from Gu Yunjian's words. Officer Gu must have loved your wife very much back then, right? Qin Yiru asked. She was already in her 40s and had already given birth to 2 children. However, for some reason, she was interested in Gu Yunjian's affairs. Gu Junjian seemed to have no one to vent his frustrations on all these years. Now that he met Qin Yiru, it was as if he finally had a place to vent his frustrations. He nodded and then shook his head. At that time, I just thought that she was pretty. I don't know if I loved her or not. In any case, this marriage was arranged by my parents when they were still alive. Later on, she suddenly said that she wanted to divorce me, so I immediately agreed. Actually, I still have some feelings for her. After all, we have been together for so many years. Qin Yiru also understood after hearing Gu Yunjian's explanation. She reckoned that Gu Yunjian's marriage was the kind of marriage where the two families were well matched in terms of social status. The rich and powerful families of the upper class were particular about matching in terms of social status. Moreover, marriage matching would also involve the interests of both families. Gu Yunjian's behavior was just like that of someone from a rich and powerful family. Actually, I'm also a little similar to you. Qin Yiru also shook her head and smiled. The night was long, but the two hearts that had been without love in their early years and had been alone and bumpy along the way gradually formed a line of intersection on two parallel lines that would never intersect. It was just that no one had noticed it yet. Going back to when Ce was dragging Yunju and Yunjian to the shop just now, Yunjian's expression changed drastically. Woof woof. Woof woof woof. It was already late at night. The night between 8:30 p.m. and 12 o'clock p.m. on New Year's Eve was the quietest. Occasionally, the sound of fireworks would resound through the sky. However, after the sound of fireworks subsided, it would be a deep silence. Yunjian and the other two could even hear the barking of dogs. Sister, brother Ce, leave quickly. Xiao Zhu is scared. There's a dog. Xiao Yunju held Yunjian's hand with one hand and Ce's hand with the other. His short legs ran even faster, and his body leaned forward like a little hero charging forward. Xiao Zhu, don't be afraid. Big sister and your Gij Ce are here. Yunjian comforted her, but Xiao Yunju still pulled her along. He didn't hear any barking the last time he came out, but this time, he heard a series of barks. Ce strode forward with his slender legs. Every step he took was enough for Xiao Yunju to drag him and Yunjian along for quite a distance. He smirked and turned slightly to the left. From the corner of his eye, he could see Yunjian's clean and delicate face through the moonlight. Xiao Yunju ran very fast when he passed by the door of the group of brats. A glint flashed across Ce's eyes. In the end, Xiao Yunju dragged the two of them to the entrance of the store. There were many people standing at the entrance of the store. These people seemed to be here to buy fireworks. Yunjian was pulled along by Xiao Yunju and Ce as they walked over. He. It's you guys. At this moment, a childlike laughter suddenly rang out. Yunjian turned her head and saw a little boy about the same age as Xiao Yunju standing beside an adult looking at them. This adult seemed to be here to buy fireworks. There was a group of people behind this little boy. They were also a group of children, and they seemed to be his playmates. Wasn't this little boy the crew-cut brat who lit the firecrackers to bomb her and Xiao Yunju? Yunjian narrowed her eyes. Chapter 477. This boy with a crew cut was called Wei Jin. He was one of the most mischievous children in the group. Yunjian and Xiao Yunju had just passed by his house. When he heard his friend's words, Wei Jin immediately picked up a small firecracker to attack Yunjian and Xiao Yunju. Especially when it was obvious that he was brainless. At this time, another child beside him egged him on, and Wei Jin immediately became angry. He had just been scolded by his mother because of the two people in front of him. This is our territory. You are not allowed to come over. Before Yunjian and Xiao Yunju could say anything, Wei Jin had already put his hands on his hips and called for his friends to hold hands and form a wall, not allowing Yunjian and the other two to pass. Children's thoughts were very naive. When the surrounding adults saw what Wei Jin and his group of children did, they simply ignored them. Idiot. When Xiao Yunju saw this, he withdrew his small hands from Yunjian and Ce's hands and pulled his eyelids down. He stuck his tongue out at Wei Jin and the others and made a funny face. What? He said we are idiots. You are the idiot, you are the idiot, you are the idiot. When Wei Jin heard this, his short and chubby body immediately walked over. Jin, come on, hit him. Chase them away. A group of boys stood behind Wei Jin and cheered. They were all typical brats. With this coaxing, Wei Jin became even more enthusiastic. When the adults weren't paying attention, he ran over and stretched out his hand to push Xiao Yunju. When children fought with children, it was usually you push me and I push you. Because the children were still young, most children didn't know any other complicated actions other than pushing each other around. However, when Wei Jin ran in front of Xiao Yunju and wanted to give him a hard push, Ce grabbed his wrist. You let go. This is between us men. Wei Jin used the attitude of an adult and looked up stubbornly at Ce. You want to bully him? Ce lowered her head and looked at Wei Jin, who was as fat as a rice ball. Her low voice was filled with dissatisfaction. Humph, he caused me to be scolded by my mother, so he wants to pay it back. Wei Jin gritted his teeth. Ha! Ce suddenly let go of Wei Jin's fat fingers. He snorted softly and didn't care about anything else when he let go. Wei Jin was a child after all. Since Ce had let go of his hand all of a sudden, he stumbled 2 steps backward and fell to the floor on his back. When he fell to the ground, his hands and buttocks didn't hurt, but Wei Jin sat on the ground and cried, "Granny! Granny! Sob sob sob, someone is bullying me." Wei Jin's crying attracted the attention of the adults who were still buying fireworks. Hearing that, an old lady in her 50s wearing flowery clothes ran out of the store while swaying her but in a very westernized manner. The old lady was still shouting, "Oh, my little baby. What happened? What happened?" After a while, the old lady rushed in front of Wei Jin and carefully pulled him up as if he was a treasure. "My precious grandson, what's wrong? Who bullied you? Granny will help you kill them even if I have to risk my life." This old lady was Wei Jin's grandmother, Mu Lanhua. When Mu Lanhua saw her precious grandson fall, her heart almost fell out of her chest. Chapter 478. Wei Jin's cries of pain made Mu Lanhua's heart ache. Mu Lanhua hurriedly pulled her precious grandson up and checked him from head to toe. She mumbled, "Io, my baby. Where does it hurt? Granny will blow on it and it won't hurt anymore." Mu Lanhua was extremely nervous. She looked Wei Jin up and down to make sure that he was fine. Then, she turned around and glared at Yunjian and the rest. This was her family's only child. In this generation, she only had one grandson. Although she had granddaughters, none of them were as valuable as her grandson. Therefore, Mu Lanhua had always doted on and protected Wei Jin since he was young. She was afraid that he would get hurt. But now, her precious grandson was pushed by someone. Mu Lanhua was furious. She reached out her scrawny hands and pointed her wrinkled fingers at Ce. She shouted angrily, "Were you the one who pushed my grandson?" Wei Jin hid behind Mu Lanhua and stuck his tongue out at Xiao Yunju when he heard that his grandmother was standing up for him. He shook his head and made a funny face. Obviously, Wei Jin became even more arrogant when he saw that his grandmother was standing up for him. Although Xiao Yunju was still young, he could understand the meaning behind Wei Jin's actions. Xiao Yunju was instantly enraged. "You're so naughty." Xiao Yunju glared back. However, Xiao Yunju had only taken 2 steps forward when Yunjian pulled him in front of her. "I didn't push him." Ce didn't show any signs of fear. He only twitched the corner of his mouth and smiled mockingly. He really didn't push Wei Jin. He reached out to grab Wei Jin's wrist because Wei Jin wanted to push Xiao Yunju. He let go just now because he didn't care about Wei Jin. However, he didn't do anything. Wei Jin's body was covered in fat, and his short and chubby body automatically collapsed to the ground. So what if he pushed Wei Jin? How dare he bully Xiao Zhu in front of him? He, Ce, had already shown mercy by not killing him. If Yunjian's family was not here, her family would not allow it. He didn't want to waste any more time talking to Wei Jin. It would be easier to just kill him. Not to mention that the child was innocent, since Ce could become the leader of Anhan, she was definitely not a benevolent person. Now, because of Yunjian, he could even restrain himself. "You didn't push it?" If you didn't push my baby, why would she fall to the ground? Young man, you look decent, how can you be so unreasonable? Huh? My grandson is still a child. You pushed him away and refused to admit it. Is there any justice in this world? Mulanhua brought up a bunch of topics as soon as she spoke. As soon as Mulanhua spoke, the people around her immediately agreed. That's right, that's right. Don't tell me that the child would fall on his own. This young man is really, he pushed someone down, but he doesn't admit it. The one who spoke was a long-tongued woman from the village. She usually liked to gossip and jeer with others. In fact, she did not even see if it was Ce who pushed Wei Jin to the ground. Brother Ce, they're all bad. Xiao Yunju tugged at Ce's sleeve in fear. The little one hid in Yunjian's arms. Ce's hawk-like gaze sharpened as the corner of his brow on his flawless face lifted slightly. He didn't speak. Mulanhua scolded for a long time. When she saw that Ce ignored her, she became angry. Then, she saw Yunjian standing beside Ce. Seeing that Yunjian was pretty, she felt that she was easy to talk to. Hence, Mulanhua decided to use Yunjian as a target. Young lady, are you this young man's girlfriend? Ha, I'm telling you as an experienced person. People like him should stay away from him as soon as possible. Chapter 479. Ce shifted his gaze from Yunjian to Mulanhua. There was a murderous glint in his eyes as his murderous aura flared. What did you just say? Say it again. He repeated her words. However, the tone that came out of his mouth was chilling. It was as if he would kill Mulanhua if she dared to say the same thing again. Mulanhua was also shocked by Ce's sudden change in demeanor. Her old bones trembled violently. The group of people who were watching the show were also frightened to the point that they quivered slightly. Say what, you want me to say? I'll say it. Mulanhua was so frightened by Ce's demeanor that she stuttered. However, Mulanhua was an old woman. If she didn't suffer any real pain, she wouldn't be afraid at all. Ce sneered when he saw Mulanhua's frightened look. This old woman actually wanted her to leave him. This was something that Ce would never allow to happen. Once he set his mind on someone, even if she died, she would be his. No one could take her away from him. He reached out and placed his slender fingers beside his belt. There was a pistol hidden here. Since this old woman had crossed his bottom line, he would not hold back anymore. Although it was troublesome to kill a person, it was just a matter of words for the Inhun organization to destroy a person completely. And since when had he, Ce, ever restricted himself to anyone? Ce was just about to reach for his pistol when a pair of soft hands held him back. Glancing at her from the corner of her eyes, she saw Yunjian's pretty face shaking from side to side. She meant to tell him not to kill. Seeing her gesture and the fact that her hand was still holding his, Ce's anger dissipated instantly and he let go of her. Yunjian did not stop Ce because she could not bear to see him kill. She had killed so many people in her previous life that she could pave a bloody path. She and he were walking on the same path. However, in front of Xiao Yunju, Yunjian did not want him to relive the terrible scene. More importantly, it was New Year's Eve. According to Qin Yiru's words, they should celebrate the new year peacefully so that everyone could be safe in the coming year. Mulanhua had no idea that she had just escaped with her life. She was now afraid of Ce. This was because the aura emitted by Ce frightened her. How shocking. Horrifying. Mulanhua fiercely glared at Ce, as well as Yunjian and Xiao Yunju. She cursed as she dragged Wei Jin into the store. Mulanhua continued, Jin, let's go. Granny loves you. Granny will buy you a bunch of delicious food. Mulanhua was immensely pleased with herself when she said this. Wei Jin was a left-behind child. Mulanhua doted on Wei Jin and provided him with good food and drinks since he was young. Wei Jin's parents worked outside and only came back during the new year. At the same time, Wei Jin's parents worked at construction sites and received a high salary. Therefore, whatever Wei Jin wanted, Mu Lanhua never lacked for him. It could be said that Mu Lanhua's family was considered very rich in a town in 1998. Therefore, Mu Lanhua spoke with a deep sense of pride. On the other hand, Ce came to Xinjiang town dressed very plainly. His clothes were from a street stall, but they were surprisingly compatible with Yunjian. Therefore, Mu Lanhua thought that Ce was poor from the start, which was why she was so aggressive. "Boss, give my grandson 5 packets of potato chips. 10 lollipops. Oh right, and 10 packets of hao jia." Mu Lanhua shouted at the top of her lungs the moment she entered the store, as if she was afraid that people did not know that her family was rich. "Okay." The shop owner nodded with a smile. At this time, Ce and Yunjian had already accompanied Xiao Yunzhu into the store. Mu Lanhua looked at Yunjian and the others with a look that said, "Can you afford it?" Chapter 480. 10 times. He wanted to buy everything in the store. When the group saw Ce tossing his bank card in front of the cashier counter and making such a bold declaration, they were all stupefied. The store had been open for a few years and had all kinds of things. However, it would take at least tens of thousands of yuan to buy everything in the store. Yet, Ce said that he wanted to buy everything at 10 times the price. That was hundreds of thousands. A few 100,000 yuan was enough to open a decent supermarket in this era. More importantly, how could he be so rich? From Ce's clothes, no one could tell that he was rich. However, perhaps it was because of his strong aura that he had a natural kingly aura. Therefore, everyone believed that he could really afford to spend so much money. Moreover, the card Ce threw out was real. This. The store owner, who was also the old man, was stunned. The store owner stood behind the cashier and was at a loss when he saw Ce throw out the bank card and what he said. As for Mu Lanhua and Wei Jin, they were standing there in a daze. Mu Lanhua's heart was racing. She suppressed her disbelief and looked at Ce as if she had seen a ghost. Could there really be so much money in the card? How could a person who could carry a bank card with hundreds of thousands of yuan on him be a simple person? But wasn't he wearing clothes from a street stall? Mu Lanhua couldn't understand. If Ce was so rich, why would he dress so shabbily? At this moment, Ce's magnetic voice was heard again. "Oh, right. There's 5 million USD in this card. Take the card. The password is 88s. You can go to the bank to verify it before you sell the items in the store to me." Ce pretended to suddenly remember something. He stretched out his hand and brushed his hair with his slender fingers. Then, he spoke to the store owner leisurely. 5 million USD. Everyone almost fainted when they heard Ce's words. There was 5 million USD in the card. 5 million USD was equivalent to 30 million RMB. 30 million RMB. A millionaire was usually the kind of person who was worth millions. In 1998, there were very few people who could become millionaires. But what about Ce? He flung out his card and it was 30 million. What a frightening thing this was. You. Mu Lanhua was not stupid. She could tell that Ce had slapped her hard in front of everyone. However, when Ce said that he would buy the store at 10 times the original price, Mu Lanhua had already regretted treating him this way. Initially, she had spoken rudely to Ce because he was dressed plainly and looked like a poor kid. However, Ce's generosity made everyone believe that even if he was the son of one of the richest men in country Z, no one would doubt him. "I'm fine. This store is mine now. I don't intend to sell the items to you, so you can leave." Ce narrowed his eyes. He glanced at Mu Lanhua from the corner of his eyes. His handsome face revealed a trace of contempt. "Don't forget to take your grandson with you. He added a reminder. To be honest, this 5 million USD card was the card that CE carried the least amount of cash on him. 5 million USD did not mean anything to him. After all, the assassins in Anhun would never accept a mission that was less than 5 million USD. Chapter 481. Mulanhua was a wealthy old lady. Her greatest pride was that she had a son who knew how to earn money. Therefore, Mulanhua was like a rich old lady, dressing herself up to the nines every day. At the same time, Mulanhua would also look down on those who were not rich. Of course, during this period, she didn't forget to make friends with those rich ladies. Mulanhua was not polite to Ce and Yunjian, but at this moment, she was speechless. Granny. It hurts. Wei Jin was still a child. He did not even have the concept of large amounts of money. Seeing that Mulanhua did not stand up for him like she usually did, Wei Jin placed his hands on his buttocks and cried at Mulanhua. The meaning of this was very obvious. Usually, Mulanhua would pluck the stars from the sky for him when she heard his cries. But today, Mulanhua was still indifferent when she heard his cries. Wei Jin was anxious. He wanted Mulanhua to stand up for him so badly. Hence, he reached out his short hand and tugged at Mulanhua's clothes. Granny, Jin is in pain. He pushed me. He just pushed me. Mulanhua had brought Wei Jin into the store to buy food. Wei Jin had stopped making a fuss. But when he saw Xiao Yunju making a funny face and smiling at him, Wei Jin got angry again. Jin, be good. Granny will bring you home. Mulanhua was speechless. She reached out and pulled Wei Jin out. No. Jin wants Granny to help Jin. I want to buy Hao Jia. I want to buy potato chips and Wang Zai. Or Jin won't go back. I won't go home. Wei Jin was pulled to the door by Mulanhua and started to make a fuss. Mulanhua was furious. She had lost all her face because of her grandson. But this was her grandson. Mulanhua squatted down and looked at Wei Jin. She said softly, Jin, let's go home. Granny will cook for you when we get home. Ce had already bought the store and even ordered them to leave. Now, everyone outside was laughing at her. Mulanhua wanted to escape home as soon as possible. She did not want to expose herself in front of the crowd and be watched as if they were watching a show. However, Wei Jin was a child who had been spoiled since he was young. With Mulanhua's tug, Wei Jin became even more displeased. Wei Jin grabbed onto the door frame and refused to let go. Wei Jin cried and shouted, No. Granny, I want to eat. Buy it for me. Jin, listen to me. Mulanhua bent down to pull Wei Jin. Wei Jin began to make threatening gestures. Crack. Wei Jin clawed at Mulanhua's face with her claws and fangs. Mulanhua could not help but scream in pain. In the next second, everyone saw a very deep fingernail mark on Mulanhua's cheek where Wei Jin's sharp nails had scratched. Fresh blood quickly flowed out from the fingernail imprint. There wasn't much blood. But after all, he had grabbed her cheeks. The face was the most important part of a woman. Even though Mulanhua was old, she still cherished her face. Mulanhua suddenly screamed in pain. She reached out and touched a pool of blood on her face caused by Wei Jin's scratch. Then, she pounced on Wei Jin like a madwoman. She muttered, Granny dotes on you so much, but you're still acting like a granny. Do you have a conscience? Mulanhua doted on her grandson, but she loved herself more. Chapter 482. Mulanhua pounced on him. She was really punching and kicking her grandson. Everyone in town knew that Mulanhua loved her grandson dearly. However, no one knew that she loved her grandson more. If she had to choose between her grandson and herself, Mulanhua would definitely choose herself. What was the point of doting on her grandson? Wasn't it because she was afraid that no one would take care of her when she grew old? From Mulanhua's perspective, her granddaughter was most likely a good-for-nothing. After a woman got married, she was like spilled water that could not be taken back. Hence, Mulanhua gave her heart to Wei Jin. Her motive was obvious. She wanted her grandson to take care of her when she grew old and needed someone to take care of her for the rest of her life. Unfortunately, Wei Jin had just done something that Mulanhua couldn't accept. He had scratched her face. Mulanhua was dressed to the nines. She was already in her 50s and 60s, but she could still do this. It was obvious that she cared a lot about her appearance. That deep claw mark had scratched Mulanhua and also exhausted her last bit of patience. That was why she attacked her grandson Wei Jin and lost control of her emotions. Her face. Such a deep claw mark. Even if it could recover in the future, it would probably leave a scar. The surrounding people were dumbfounded when they saw Mulanhua, who usually doted on her grandson, pounce on Wei Jin and pinch him while scolding him. Mulanhua was hitting Wei Jin as hard as she usually doted on him. Wei Jin was so scared that his whole body was shaking like a sieve. He looked at his grandmother in horror. For the first time, he felt that this shrewish grandmother in front of him was not like the grandmother he used to know. In the end, the surrounding people could not stand it anymore and pulled Mulanhua away. Wei Jin was so scared that he curled up and did not say another word. In the end, Wei Jin's mother heard about the incident and rushed to the store to take Wei Jin and Mulanhua away. The farce ended, but it was not hard to see that after today, the topic of Mulanhua doting on her grandson would change. The shop owner, who had been silent all this while, held CE's bank card in his hand. He finally had a chance to speak and asked CE, "This card?" "Take the card. Go to the bank to verify it and get the money. Bring everything in the shop to this address." CE reached out and used his slender fingers to pick up a broken black pen by the cashier's counter. Then, he took a piece of white paper from the table and quickly wrote down an address before handing it to the shop owner. The shop owner was stunned. He took the card and frowned at CE. "Young man, aren't you afraid that I'll take all the money in this card if you tell me the password?" "Of course I trust you." CE smiled nonchalantly. The shop owner's heart warmed. He laughed loudly and accepted the card and address. Then, he promised CE, "I, old Zhang, have been doing business for so many years and have never been greedy. Don't worry, I won't take a single cent of the extra money in the card. I'll send the item to you." "Okay." CE smiled. In the end, Xiao Yunzhu picked a few packets of Lay's potato chips for himself. He could not eat that much even if he played with them. Besides, CE had bought the entire store. In the future, Xiao Yunzhu would have everything he wanted. After Xiao Yunzhu bought the snacks, the three of them quickly returned to Zhang Meihua's house. On the way back, they saw that Wei Jin's front door was tightly shut. Needless to say, there was already a huge commotion going on. Chapter 483. The moment Yun Jian smiled sweetly, CE caught sight of it. He smiled silently and raised his eyebrows. Yun Jian and CE brought Xiao Yunzhu back to Zhang Meihua's house. Qin Yiru and Gu Junjian had already started chatting happily. When Yun Jian opened the door and walked in, Qin Yiru and Gu Junjian didn't feel anything was wrong. The conversation between Qin Yiru and Gu Junjian was akin to complaining about her years of suffering to the other party. Finally, the heavy burden in her heart was released. All these years, whether it was Qin Yiru or Gu Junjian, they had hidden their hearts in the deepest part of their hearts and didn't let others find out. But just now, the two of them had a heart-wrenching conversation. Since they were outsiders, it didn't matter even if they revealed everything. So Qin Yiru and Gu Junjian chatted happily. At this moment, Yun Jian, CE, and Xiao Yunzhu returned. "You're back." Qin Yiru asked when she saw Yun Jian and the other two walk in. Yeah. Yun Jian nodded. At this moment, Xiao Yunju, who was standing between Yun Jian and Ce and holding their hands, was already a little drowsy. Xiao Yunju's eyes were almost closed into slits, but he still forced himself not to fall asleep. Xiao Yunju was still growing. Yun Jian let go of his hand and squatted down to look at him. She said to him, Xiao Yunju, you should sleep. Big sister will accompany you to sleep first, okay? At Xiao Yunju's age, most children would want to stay up until midnight and wait for the adults to give them red packets. Because it was very exciting to do this at that age. His eyelids were fighting, but Xiao Yunju still held them open and shook his head. Yun Jian couldn't help but caress Xiao Yunju's face as she said to him, Xiao Yunju, go to sleep. When you wake up, you'll be able to wear new clothes and receive the red packet from brother Ce. If you don't sleep now, you won't get any red packets. Yun Jian said in an enticing tone. However, Yun Jian's guidance was indeed effective. No, then Xiao Zhu will go to sleep. Xiao Yunju naughtily slipped away from Yun Jian and ran upstairs. Xiao Zhu, be careful. Qin Yiru saw Xiao Yunju jumping up the stairs, so she went up to protect him. When Qin Yiru was at home, Xiao Yunju usually slept with her. Yun Jian breathed a sigh of relief at once. She suddenly felt that children weren't so easy to coax. If you wanted to coax him, you had to coax him to the point of a gun. Otherwise, he wouldn't listen to you. When Gu Junjian saw that only he, Yun Jian, and Ce were left downstairs, he instantly blushed and ran upstairs. He said that he was going to find Qin Yiru to ask where she was going to sleep. In a moment, only Yun Jian and Ce were left downstairs. Yun Jian only just realized this. She rolled her eyes and pursed her lips. I'm going back to my room too. With that, Yun Jian walked up the stairs. Ce followed closely behind. The room that was prepared for Yun Jian was on the 3rd floor. It was only a wall away from Ce's room. Although there were many rooms in Zhang Meihua's house, it wasn't a villa. Every room here was connected by a wall. Yun Jian didn't plan to stay up late. At her age, it didn't make a difference whether she stayed up late or not. Standing in her room, Yun Jian looked at Ce, who was standing outside the door. She gestured to close the door and said to him, "Good night." With that, Yun Jian moved the door to close it. However, before she could push it, the door was suddenly blocked. In the next second, a tall figure flashed in and closed the door behind him. You're tuning in to the Biyao's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.